Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it's I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, and your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, coming at you once again from a very discombobulated Robservatory, but I hope to alleviate that. Wait do you see it? There's a lot going on, but I promise you, and you're gonna get to see it because I'm gonna have camera mounts and all that. It's a process. It's a process. First of all, I wanted to say to everyone out there, Happy Father's Day. I have to just say that one of Elizabeth's daughters, before I went on the show, stopped me. Oldest daughter Zoe Trope, and she wished me a happy Father's Day and said I was a terrific stepfather, which was kind of a lovely thing to hear, to be honest. And so thank you to Sophie and Zoe for being women who are teaching me a great deal about life. And I want to thank them for that. And late in life, I've been afforded the opportunity to be father-esque. And I think that's great. I hope all of you have fathers out there, and the ones that don't, well, I hope you remember them. I myself, my father passed away over a decade ago, but I think about him all the time. As a matter of fact, if you'd like to see him, here he is. He's on the left. My dad has the cigar in his mouth. He had an ever-present cigar in his mouth most of my life. And like my dad was on the right is Mark Altman's dad. And this is on the set of Free Enterprise. This is on a club, at a club that we were shooting at called the Garden of Eden. And we cast our fathers as bartenders. And, you know, back then you could smoke. I don't know why a bartender would be allowed to smoke a cigar all the time, but I figured if my dad was ever a bartender, he would have figured out a way to let them, he would have figured out a way for them to let him smoke. So here's my father Dick Burnett, Richard, and Mark Altman's father. And on the set, again, of Free Enterprise, my dad, it was very funny. My dad, when I told him we were making a movie, you know, he thought it was like, I mean, he understood I worked on movies, but he didn't know what it was really like. And on this day, when I flew him in from Arizona, where he was living, and said, okay, you're going to play this bartender. You have a scene with William Shatner and Deborah Van Valkenburg. And he just didn't get it. And when I took him to the set in the morning, he couldn't believe it. There was like 100 extras and all the crew and where we were shooting. And he was just blown away. And it was one of the most delightful days of his life, he said. So, yeah. So I hope it was a great memory for him, but that's what he looked like. And he was there with Mark Altman's father. So it was, you know, my dad was a great guy, and he taught me a lot, and he always took me to the movies that I want to see. Like, I've told you stories about how, like, when Dawn of the Dead opened, my dad would take me to the box office, and he would lie and say my mom was inside, how he was able to pull that one off. No one's mother was inside waiting for them when they were seeing Dawn of the Dead when they shouldn't have been because they were 12 or 13. But my dad was there doing that for me. I've told the story about how he took me to Phantasm on the Saturday of the weekend it opened. He stayed for the first 5 minutes, and when Tommy was killed by the lady in lavender in the cemetery, my father got up. He didn't say anything. He never came back, and he was waiting for me when the movie was over because he knew how much I wanted to see it. So, yes, my dad was a tremendous man, and I miss him terribly. He passed away when he was 83 years old, and he led a pretty great life up until the last year was tough for him. But up until then, he was a character. So, yeah. So happy Father's Day to everybody out there who's a father or a father-to-be or wants to say hello to their own fathers or dads are important. So thinking about my dad today. You know what else I've been thinking about? Okay. We've talked about this on this show for a while. And it is the idea of actors playing roles. And for instance, can someone who's not disabled play a disabled character? I personally, the movie I've recently finished a movie that I was working on for a long time that I produced and edited called Tango Shalom. And in that film, we had, there is a character, a young girl who suffers from MS. And the actress that was chosen to play that role did not, in fact, have MS. And we had to be very careful and judicious. She's really doesn't appear in the film very much, but we had to be very careful about her portrayal. And we really thought about it, and we really debated, Gabe, the director, and I, for a long time. And I've told you the story of there was a project I was working on that never got made, but I was in the process of casting that project. And there was an actress that was suggested to me by my casting director and co-producer. And she said, take a look at this actress. She's a trans actress. She's a trans woman. But I think she's very talented, and you should take a look at her. And I did. And I watched some of the work she'd done, and she was terrific. And she's also a beautiful woman. And I cast her not because she was trans or not because she was attractive. I cast her because she was a really good actress. And I thought that she also had a unique a quality to her, that because she was playing extraterrestrial as well, that really added to the part. She really brought something, and I was very excited to work with her. Unfortunately, it never happened, but I would absolutely use this actress in the future. And it was something, it was interesting to me because when it was just a fact, it would be like the fact that I knew she was trans, well, that quickly went out of my mind when I met her and we talked. We actually went to lunch and we talked about the role and what I wanted, and I just really liked her as an actress. So the fact that she was trans quickly fell by the wayside, and she just was a great actress I was really excited to work with. But I'm always thinking about this subject. And there's been a lot of controversy about this subject for a long time. Most recently, Scarlett Johansson she was going to play a trans man, and because there was an outcry, the project got scuttled. And I'm deeply conflicted by this whole thing, because on one hand, as you all know, I'm the viceroy of verisimilitude. When you are making a movie, when you're trying to create a reality within the proscenium of that frame, to me, whatever is going to allow you to create that reality on screen for your audience supersedes all other concerns. If you're telling a story, and that's the job that you have as a filmmaker, that's what you're supposed to be doing, is telling a story. You're not an activist. What you're trying to do is you're trying to hire the very best people for the job. And when I say that, that's the entire crew. That's not just your acting staff. That's everybody. Everybody. Now, that said, I also say every day, every person you meet tells a story that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. Well, there's a lot of people that have not been afforded opportunities in life to get into positions where I know about their talent, or I would be in a position to hire them, because I don't know what they can offer. I don't know what stories they have to tell I haven't heard. I don't know how they can benefit my production because they haven't got to a certain level. Now, here's my thinking on that. On one hand, I think the more diverse voices, the more diverse talent, and when I say diverse, I don't just mean the superficiality of our external color, but the experiences people bring from all walks of life. And when you have those kinds of experiences, you have more diverse experience on a movie set, I think it can only benefit you. However, movies are, of course, very expensive to make. And again, you can't be an activist. Now, some people would say, well, what if you give people, I love giving people a leg up and challenging them, because usually if people get into positions when something really means something, you get their best. They're going to give you their best. I believe in doing that too. But when you have to make a 12-hour day and you're burning money literally every second as you do on a film, again, you can't be an activist. Some people might say, oh, yes, you can. Well, you've never had to be in charge of a budget where you've had to make your day, and you cannot be willing to compromise when you're making a film. You just can't, because there's too much at stake. First of all, if you hire 100 people that are great, that you think are the best, and then the 101st person you hire is not as good as the rest, you're doing the 100 people that you've hired a disservice as well, not just your film. So I think I'm torn by these issues. I'm constantly, because people will tell you, well, there are people in the world that haven't had a leg up to be able, they didn't have the opportunities, say, I had or everybody else on the crew had. Well, that's when you have to start drawing a line in the sand and saying, that's life. You have to be like, look, I understand there's people that haven't had the opportunities, but life isn't fair. The universe is indifferent, and certainly I've spent 30 years of my career. For every one thing I've worked on, there's 20 things I didn't, and 20 things I tried to make happen that didn't happen, and it is a hard, horrible business. By the way, for everybody. And the percentage of the population that even tries to get in, and I mean the whole population, that tries to get into the movie business is incredibly small. So, it's not like, and I one of the things about the movie business, which people don't really know, I mean, there's all this talk about how, look, the movie business is a place where innovative, outside the box thinkers can thrive. And if you want to get into the movie business, if you want to make a movie, which is one of the hardest things in the world to do, and it turns out well, the movie business can also be one of the places that, hey, they don't care what color you are, they don't care how you identify as what your gender is. If you've made a good film and they think they can exploit you and your talent and make money, you're in. You're in. I mean, if you're talented and you can make money for people and you're a team player, all those superficialities, all those things fall away, because people really, they just want good product that they can sell and make a lot of money from. And if you make something good and everybody else can like glom onto you and take credit for that, they will. So it's a hard slog. So it's a tough arena. But as the viceroy of verisimilitude, there are things that I would say that obviously, as we have grown and evolved as people, you don't do. Blackface, for instance. I would never cast a non-black actor and have them wear blackface to play a black American or anybody around the world who is black. One, because it's incredibly disrespectful. Two, no verisimilitude. But three, there are a bunch of world-class black actors that I would like to have in those parts. I mean, at the end of the day, there's so many reasons why you wouldn't do that, and the fact is you have a lot of world-class, a great pool of actors to choose from, and that's what you want to do. You want to find the best actors for the role that bring you incredible verisimilitude. Now, that said, I don't care what race you are. Not every actor is right for every part. There are older actors. There are younger actors. If I wanted to cast, say, an actor who is 30 years old, I can't cast an actor who's 65 unless the part's rewritten. So a 65-year-old actor cannot expect to play a 30-year-old. Maybe if you're Joan Crawford and you can be on your daughter's sitcom, maybe you could play that off. I don't know. But for the most part, that doesn't work. The realities of life have to somehow step in, and that's a problem. Now, am I discriminating against older actors if I wouldn't cast a 65-year-old to play a 30-year-old? No, the part's a 30-year-old. That's the part. Now, what's interesting is a lot of the time, if I was working on a project, I don't even delineate, unless it's part of the script itself, I don't even necessarily delineate the race of a character. Like, if I'm working on a project, I never in my mind picture a certain kind of actor, because one of the great things about working on films, especially if you have a great casting director, is that's an art. And there are people, a great casting director, I've worked a lot with a woman named Christine Sheeks. I call her my professional wife, PW. And she has a great eye for talent. She won an award for casting Boogie Nights, for instance. Great casting directors think out of the box. And a great casting director will come to you and go, have you ever thought about a black actor for this role, or an Asian actor, or maybe even gender switch? So I know it's written as a man, but maybe you could put a female in there. That might be interesting. And here's who I was thinking of. And so when you have that kind of collaborative mentality, you never know where it's going to lead you. You never know where it's going to lead you. Then there's also ultimately the economic and artistic concerns. At the end of the day, you have to make the best movie possible. You have to tell the best story possible that also will hopefully become successful and make money. So, unfortunately, making movies is a commercial enterprise. And at the end of the day, you just have to draw the line somewhere. And what you want, in my mind, is I'm a meritocratist. I've said that many times. I don't even know if that's a word. You hire the best people for the jobs, and you keep your mind open. So hopefully, you will allow everybody to bring their creative A game, and you create something greater than the sum of your parts. Now, that said, there are a lot of marginalized groups, such as trans actors. And look, the trans community is a small percentage of our population, but just like any percentage of the population, there are trans people that want to be actors. And they want to be able to play all kinds of roles, just like anybody would. So one of the things that trans actors want to be able to do is play roles where they aren't necessarily trans. Like if I cast a trans woman in the role, I'm just saying that for the sake of argument. In my mind, she's not trans. She's just the female actress I hired for the role. So it becomes a non-issue to me. And the fact is, there just aren't a lot of trans women, or I'm calling them trans women for the sake of argument. They're women. So if you're casting, say, a trans woman for a part, and let's say she's competing against a known actress that has box office clout. Now, unless the trans actress blows me away and delivers the greatest performance, then she's not going to get in the room. And it's not because she's trans, it's because of the economic realities of movie making. You know, you have to put people in roles that will get audiences to pay money to watch the film. I mean, at the end of the day, and the same is true of, let's take out all of the marginalized people. Let's just take, say you're casting a role, for just a female's role. There's only like 5 or 6 people every studio wants you to cast. And every other actress, if you want to go different ways, competing against those same 6 people. Is that fair? Perhaps not. But that is a reality of the business. And it's a reality that you cannot escape from. And you can be as liberal or as progressive as you want to be. But eventually it comes down to, there's an economic reality to making movies, and you have to adhere to that. And then people would say, well, how is anybody going to break through? Well, that's true of anybody trying to work in the movie business. I mean, you got to figure out how to break through on your own. You know, you can get to a certain point and people get shots. But look, every single person who is working in the business, I mean, there's a few that I've met who got their jobs via nepotism, but for the most part, everybody that I've met and the people that I work for and the people that have worked for me, we're all lifers, man. This was an avocation that we, for whatever reason, came and got us. We all migrated to LA, and we've been busting our asses for decades. And let me tell you, it has been a long, hard slog. It is never easy. Every job is a pain in the ass, and every job is miraculous that you even had it. But still, I'm always torn. Now, the issue comes down to, let's say you have a character who's gay, a gay man. Do you have to cast a gay actor in that role? Well, this is where, to me, this is where I find myself, I have a conundrum. Because on the other hand, as the viceroy of verisimilitude, I would say that, well, of course you must. Like, to get that verisimilitude, I would, an actor who's supposed to be playing a gay character who happens to also be gay in real life could probably bring whatever that unknown quantity or quality is to the role that gives me the verisimilitude that I want. But that said, what if the reality and the economic concerns, what if an A-list actor wants to play that same part? Do I draw a line in the sand and I say, Nope, nope. I'm not going to hire this A-list actor. I must hire a man. If the A-list, I mean, if the A-list actor is straight, I'm not going to hire that actor. I must stand on ceremony, and I must have a gay man in the role. Well, that might be the activist thing to do and the progressive thing to do, but is that serving the movie itself? Is that serving the audience? Is that serving the economic realities of the people? Am I serving my investors or the studio or whomever? I mean, it's a tough call. It's a hard thing. And on one hand, I would say, yes, you absolutely have to cast a gay actor. But on the other hand, it's acting. It's all make-believe. When Matt Damon plays an astronaut lost on Mars, he's never been to Mars. He's not an astronaut. So, do I only cast someone who's been to Mars and who's an astronaut? Well, then that pretty much rules out every single human being who's ever lived ever. So, then what do? Then where is your argument? Then how do you go, well, you got a point there, Rob. What if I cast somebody who's supposed to play a married person and they're not married? Where is your argument there? People would not have a problem with that. Well, of course you can do that. Of course you can have somebody play an astronaut. Okay, well then why then when it comes, well, the matter of representation. It's tough. And it's like, okay, you have a point. You have a point. Now, there's a couple of articles. You know what's great? When there's not a lot of entertainment news, and I can find topics for this show by the things that I've pondered and it's usually people who bring it up on this show. Like some of the letters and the things I read on the show, I wander around for like a week contemplating and thinking about. And I thank you all for that, which is one of the reasons I love doing the show. But this question's come up a lot in the last week. So I went and I did some digging on that newfangled contraption known as the internet. And I figured I would share some of what I discovered on the internet. And by the way, I leave no stone unturned. I'll read anything from any site. Now, this first article I found comes from LGBTQnation.com. This was from Sunday, July 14th, 2019, a little less than a year ago. Daniel Villarreal, I think, or Villarreal, wrote this. And should cis actors like Scarlett Johansson be allowed to play trans roles? Actress Scarlett Johansson has drawn ire in the past for playing a whitewashed role in the film adaptation of the Japanese anime Ghost in the Shell, and being cast as a trans man in a never-produced historical film, Hug and Tug, a role she later declined after backlash from the trans community. But in a new interview with As If magazine, Johansson said she feels she should be allowed to play any person or any tree or any animal, a possible nod to her aforementioned acting controversies. Here's her full quote. As an actor, I should be allowed to play any person or any tree or any animal because that's my job and the requirements of my job. I feel like it's a trend in my business and it needs to happen for various social reasons. Yet there are times it does get uncomfortable when it affects the art because I feel art should be free of restrictions. She later clarified her comments in a statement to Entertainment Weekly. I personally feel that in an ideal world, any actor should be able to play anybody, and art, in all of its forms, should be immune to political correctness. That is the point I was making, albeit it didn't come across that way. I recognize that in reality, there is a widespread discrepancy amongst my industry that favors Caucasian, cisgendered actors, and that not every actor has been given the same opportunities that I have been privileged to. I continue to support, and always have, diversity in every industry and will continue to fight for projects where everyone is included. Johansson was cast to play Dante Tex Gill, a real-life trans male owner of Pittsburgh massage parlors during the 1970s. When people criticized her for perpetuating trans face, that is, cis actors playing trans roles, Johansson's rep snidely responded, "Tell them they can be directed to Jeffrey Tambor, Jared Leto, and Felicity Huffman's reps for comment," a reference to other cis actors who'd won awards by playing trans roles. She later dropped the role, effectively killing the film, and subsequently said, "In light of recent ethical questions raised surrounding my casting as Dante Tex Gill, I have decided to respectfully withdraw my participation in the project. I've learned a lot from the community since making my first statement about my casting and realized it was insensitive. I have great admiration and love for the trans community and am grateful that the conversation regarding inclusivity in Hollywood continues. When gay cisgender actor Matt Bomer played a trans sex worker in the 2018 film Anything, trans actress and filmmaker Jen Richards made a compelling argument that such roles perpetuate violence against trans women by reinforcing the idea that trans women are just cis guys playing dress-up. Film producers often cast cis actors in trans roles to snag big-name actors, and because there are a limited number of trans actors with enough film experience to give producers their choice of age and body types. But all of these problems are only perpetuated by not hiring trans actors." A lot of good points there. But here's like, okay, here's a couple of things about this particular story. So, if Dante Tex Gill is a trans man, he's a man. He's a man. He's not a trans man. He's a man. So if you cast an actor to play Dante Tex Gill, if you hired a male actor to play that character, would that be... Can you only hire a trans man? Because isn't it true, and isn't one of the things that happens with like the trans community, that if you have a trans woman, she's a woman? So if you're playing a character, if you're playing a real life character as a trans woman, if you hire a woman who's not trans but a woman actress to play that role, should there not be a problem? Now in this case, Scarlett Johansson was being hired to play Dante Tex Gill, but the problem was that she is not a trans man, but so it's very iffy. I mean, I again, I think all of this, and is trans face the same as black face, which I don't necessarily think it is, but maybe I'm not enlightened enough. I don't know. Because if you're a trans person, I think it would seem like it's like blackface. I can understand that. And then it comes into, what is an actor's job? An actor's job is to portray someone they are not. I mean, Cate Blanchett once portrayed Bob Dylan in a movie. Was that okay? I thought it was okay. I thought it was pretty cool, actually. But it's a very interesting question. But I think in this particular case, the story of Dante Tex Gill, which is a story about a very unique individual, didn't get told. The project didn't happen. The project needed a star of Scarlett Johansson's ability and her box office draw and her credibility to get made. Now, unfortunately, that story was not heard. It was not heard by a population of the world that could have gained insight into the life of Dante Tex Gill and had maybe newfound respect for trans people that didn't exist previously. But unfortunately, the story didn't get told. So then, maybe that's a tragedy. So there's all of these different things that come into play. So, okay, I understand. Trans activists, trans people who have been marginalized for a long period of time, well, forever a period of time. So they have a very good point. But then on the other hand, if a man was cast in the role, how would they have felt about that? Because it seems to me you're a little limiting if only a trans woman can play a trans woman, but yet trans women are fighting to be recognized as women, which they are. So it's something I grapple with. And my feelings about it are ultimately that the story, the actor, all of that. But then people would say, "Well, Rob, what you're saying, then you would be okay with blackface," and you're like, "Well, no, because to me that completely shatters the verisimilitude. It destroys the reality, obviously, of what you're trying to do." And then people would say, "Well, when you're dealing with gender differences, they're not as overt as, say, blackface would be." So then, again, am I right? Am I wrong? Am I not progressive enough? These are all very interesting questions that I don't necessarily have answers to. But the one thing that I can say is the story of Dante Tex Gill that was going to be told, and it was going to be told in a way where people would see it and people would experience it. That story that people don't know didn't get told. And I think that's the biggest tragedy of all, is that the story wasn't heard. Every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. If the story were told, who knows who would have listened? Who knows how many people would have changed their minds? I think there's something to be said by the fact that if you look at our media over the last 20 years, I think the portrayals of LGBTQ people definitely contribute to the fact that there's now same-sex marriage allowed in this country. And it was allowed fairly quickly. Eric McCormack, who's famously in Free Enterprise, but more famously was Will on Will and Grace. He's a married man. What if someone said that, you know what, we're not allowing, this show isn't going to be on the air because Will was not played by a real gay man. But how much did Will and Grace do for people that might have had prejudicial feelings against LGBTQ people? How many people liked that character and changed their minds, had their minds opened and realized, people aren't watching Will and Grace and thinking to themselves, well, Eric McCormack isn't gay in real life. A lot of people thought he was gay because he's a great actor, which is how it should be. Because you shouldn't be thinking about someone's real life when you're watching them on screen. Although, again, these days I can't even say that. But for the most part, I would hope that when you descend into a part, into a role, and you shouldn't be thinking about a person. I don't want people thinking about what those people do in real life or what they're like in real life when they're watching my films or whatever. Or I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want it at all. Now, there's another element to this, and disabled actors. Disabled actors. Found another article. I got this from urevolution.com, and this article is by August Pritchett. Should non-disabled actors play disabled characters? In late 2017, a film called The Upside was released in theaters, in which Bryan Cranston plays a wealthy quadriplegic man and Kevin Hart's character is his hired carer. However, there's one major problem with the movie. Bryan Cranston isn't a disabled actor. This is nothing new in Hollywood. For the disabled community, and more specifically disabled actors, hiring an abled actor to play a quadriplegic is just another blow. But I see why the casting choice was made. In the excited words of my mom, it's freaking Bryan Cranston. It was more logical, money-wise, to hire an actor with a name many people recognize rather than to hire a disabled actor that no one's ever heard of. As someone who's been disabled my entire life, but also has a lot of knowledge of how film production works, I'm sympathetic to both parties. I'm also a Libra, the mediator of the zodiac, so I can blame my sign for not seeing everything black and white. On social media, many in the disability community demand disabled actors to play every disabled role. No ifs, ands, or buts. In Hollywood, actors and directors defend their decisions. Regarding his role as a disabled man, in an article by Sky News, Cranston is quoted as saying, "As actors, we're asked to be other people, to play other people. If I, as a straight older person, and I'm wealthy, I'm very fortunate, does that mean I can't play a person who's not wealthy? Does that mean I can't play a homosexual?" He also admits that he believes his casting was a business decision, which the disability community on Twitter had a field day picking bones with. Though I'm not saying he's entirely correct, Cranston's comment brings up a point about what the very essence of acting is: pretending to be someone you're not. Considering it was more acceptable for actors to play other genders, sexualities, and even other races in the past, people didn't really think twice when it came to abled actors playing disabled characters. Presently, however, there are lines actors can't cross when choosing roles. Authenticity and employment for disabled actors. There are two reasons for the push to hire disabled actors: authenticity and employment. I'll start off by discussing the first reason. So pull up your armchairs and get your overpriced Philosophy 101 textbook from College Ready, because this is going to get deep. Not that kind of deep. Get your mind out of the gutter. Many people feel that if there's a disabled character role available, only a disabled actor can portray it authentically. But what is authentically? What is authenticity? You can go down rabbit holes that are so deep you end up on the other side of the planet and still won't find a definite conclusion. Maybe authenticity isn't the best word to describe what the disabled community wants when it comes to portraying characters with disabilities. Perhaps a better word is accuracy. That was tweeted by A Rose Pritchett 1. Okay, so I'm just going to be blunt and say what I think. There's no such thing as authenticity in film unless it's a documentary. Even then, it's still organized so that the filmmakers are telling one version of the story, making it appealing to audiences. It may not be truly authentic for Sally Hawkins, an abled actress, to play a mute woman in The Shape of Water, but R.J. Mitty, who plays Cranston's son with cerebral palsy in Breaking Bad and actually has the condition, has never been a meth dealer's son. If you go with the argument that only actors who are like the characters that can play them, then it can be argued that only a guy with cerebral palsy who has had a father who made and dealt crystal meth can play Walter White Jr. Do you need to be a disabled actor to play an authentic disabled character? Maybe authenticity isn't the best word to describe what the disabled community wants when it comes to portraying characters with disabilities. Perhaps a better word is accuracy. Naturally, someone who has experienced the same things as the character are going to have the most accurate portrayal. At the same time, though, an abled actor can do a lot of research into what living with the character's particular disability is like, and combine that information with the personality of the character in order to fulfill the role with as much accuracy as possible. Yet, there are minor things that disabled people experience that can bring the role to its fullest potential. A sighted actor doesn't have the years of navigation by touch skills that blind people have. Sign language users are more fluent than those who learn it just for a role. Paralyzed bodies move differently than non-paralyzed bodies, and so on and so forth. In addition, disabled actors will most likely have a deeper understanding of some of their characters' emotions if they've experienced the same troubles and victories in their own lives. Like I said, abled actors can do research in order to give the most accurate performance possible of a disabled character. This would be fine, not good, just fine, like Ross when Rachel and Joey kissed in Friends, if there wasn't an abundance of disabled actors not getting hired. This parallels a broader issue of employment and disability. In the U.S., only around 36% of disabled people are employed. When there are a plethora of disabled actors out there and directors choose abled people time and time again, it's just not fair, especially when an actor is getting a lot of praise and money for playing a disabled character. Do I think that every single disabled role absolutely must go to an actor with a matching disability? Not exactly. Put your pitchforks down, let me explain. If a character in a film or television show isn't initially disabled in the beginning, but is later on, then I think that's acceptable in most cases. One example would be T.J. Thine as Dr. Hodgins in Bones, when his character becomes paralyzed from the waist down late in the series. Another role, which generated more controversy, is Eddie Redmayne's Oscar-winning performance in the Stephen Hawking biopic, The Theory of Everything. The film is about Hawking's relationship with Jane as his ALS progresses from diagnosis to being totally paralyzed. A lot of people complain that an actor with the disability should have been hired, but the only way that would work would be to hire several actors at various stages of progression who all happen to look the same as a young Stephen Hawking. Yeah, that's a pretty tall order. There's the magic of CGI, but that's often very time-consuming, difficult, and expensive to use for a character who's going to be on screen for the entire duration of a film. Non-disabled actors playing disabled roles. Another case I see for hiring an abled actor for a disabled character is when the disability in particular would be difficult to work with. inaccessibility of sets aside, because that's a whole spiel in itself, some disabilities go beyond physical limitations. Many people have conditions that give them chronic fatigue, aka spoonies. Because of that, they might only be able to work on a set for a couple of hours before needing to rest. This might be okay for a minor role, but main actors can spend 10 hours or more working. 10? Come on, man. If there's a film about a character with chronic fatigue syndrome, then this would be an incident where it'd be better to hire someone who has longer stamina. In addition, a film set might be sensory overload for some people who are on the autism spectrum. Rather than have a person be in an overwhelming situation just because they have the exact same form of neurodivergence, it would be better to have someone who's better at coping or won't get overwhelmed at all. Should non-disabled actors play disabled characters is a never-ending debate. Non-disabled actors playing disabled roles is an issue that the disability community has had enough of. It often feels like it's us versus Hollywood. However, instead of attacking filmmakers every time it happens, I think it's important to evaluate the plausibility of hiring an actor with that exact same condition. At the same time, disabled actors need to be hired more instead of choosing big names because they're guaranteed money. Psst, filmmakers, I bet you get a lot of publicity if you hire disabled actors in your movies. Rather than having a big divide between disabled people and filmmakers, there needs to be an open discussion, because I feel like there'd be a lot for all of us to learn if there was. Again, interesting perspective. The one thing I think is missing from that perspective, however, is actors like Bryan Cranston have spent years and years honing their craft both on screen, on movies, and in television shows. So it's not just a question of hiring an able actor versus a disabled actor. You're hiring a veteran actor with a lot of experience. Now, I would say that if there's a disabled actor that has as much experience as Bryan Cranston, then you're talking about a case that can be made. Now, people would say, but Rob, disabled actors will never get the opportunities that a Bryan Cranston is going to get. So how are they supposed to get in those roles? Well, that's when I have to say, unfortunately, you run into the fact that the universe is indifferent. And I know it's a terrible thing to say, but the fact is, it ain't show friends, it's not show activism, it's show business. And at the end of the day, you have to hire people that are the most talented. You know, I always go back to the idea of LeBron James. I'm never going to be LeBron James. I grew up playing basketball. I played basketball. It was very apparent to me as I played, as I got from junior high, from elementary school to junior high, moving into high school, I just wasn't that good. You know, I was never going to be on my high school basketball team. And frankly, I was more interested in movies and other things. But, you know, I played basketball, I played t-ball and baseball, you know, went from t-ball to farm leagues and all that. So I did play sports growing up. And the one sport I loved that I stuck with was skiing. But it was like, you know, you realize at a certain point that you're just not going to be the best basketball player in the world. There are people that are a lot better than you. Now, it might have been my dream to be a professional NBA star. I mean, it wasn't, but it might have been. And does that mean that I should get the same opportunities that others? No. Because in order to be a great basketball player, you have to be a great basketball player. And if you're not, then you have to, that's the reality of the universe. That's the reality of the world that we live in. So at some point, you also have to respect the time and the talent and the skills that people have developed. A lot of our best actors have been developing these skills over an entire lifetime. Now, I understand that the argument then is made that but people who are disabled didn't have the opportunity in order to develop those skills. And I'm like, I know. So why would somebody hire a person who just has, for whatever reason, if you don't have the skill set, why would you get hired no matter what? I mean, it's the harsh reality of life. Now, some people could say that you're being ableist or something. But at some point, you got to draw the line and go, no, there's an economic reality to the movies that we're going to make. Now, is it better that Bryan Cranston was in that movie with Kevin Hart? I think it is. I think it's better that that story is told by two actors that are very capable, and there are people that have never considered these kinds of topics before, and they might sit down and watch that movie, and it opens up their minds. So I think it's better that that movie exists. I mean, assuming, that, again, these are all like, well, Rob, what if the movie was didn't have such an uplifting, what if it wasn't, that good or something? I'm like, well, these are all very nuanced questions. That's why all the questions that we grapple with in the modern day are tough. They're hard. They don't have easy answers. You need smart, intelligent, well-educated, healthy people to not knee-jerk, not I want this right now. You have to understand that these are three-dimensional arguments that have to be looked at in a very nuanced way, and there's no easy answers. But it's fascinating, and I don't know the answer. My inclination is that if you have a story that deals with this subject matter, and it deals with it in a compassionate, interesting way, that moviegoers will be enriched after you have watched this. I think telling those stories, getting those stories out into the world are better. It's always better to get the story out in whatever way, shape, or form it's done. And because then people can talk about it. It keeps the discussion going. It keeps people's minds thinking. Now, there's a final article. Actually, there's two, but this final article was in GQ. We're not asking straight actors who play queer characters the right question. Again, this is by Chris Mandel, and it was published on June 28th, 2019. And this picture is obviously for Call Me By Your Name. The funniest and saddest, and therefore best, observation during the 2019 Oscar season was that there was more gay sex and queer characters in an 18th century black comedy about the Queen than there was in a biopic about the gay frontman of the band Queen. Yorgos Lanthimos' The Favorite used a period setting and a trio of female talents, Olivia Colman, Emma Stone, and Rachel Weisz, to thread together a naughty tale of scheming, backstabbing, and oral sex. It was bawdy and inelegant and queer as hell. It was the crown on poppers. Meanwhile, a film celebrating the campy queer icon Freddie Mercury played it straight, narrow, and overly polished, aside from where his famous teeth were concerned. Neither film was perfect, but like a big gay Trojan horse, those films rolled into town and had a familiar conversation come pouring out. Is it right that these queer characters are all played by heterosexual actors? Well, no. But also, yes. It is both a problem and not a problem, because the whole issue is thorny. In fact, it increasingly feels like the wrong question to ask. A should invites either a yes or no response. But we're never going to reach a collective decision because such a decision would be impossible to make. It's this binary way of dealing with the issue that results in Rachel Weisz likening the experience of playing queer characters to playing an alcoholic or notorious heterosexual Matt Damon telling an interviewer, whether you're straight or gay, people shouldn't know anything about your sexuality, which sounds a hell of a lot like don't ask, don't tell. Asking a bad question will always result in a bad answer. By asking whether straight men should play gay roles, we are asking a question that's far too simplistic, removing any chance for nuanced discussion. It forces us to decide, like a judge holding a gavel, what is permissible, and to issue a collective, permanent verdict. A yes or no question will never get to the root of how an actor can successfully engage with queer themes. So why don't we start asking how instead? How can a straight actor successfully play a queer part? A constructive appraisal of straight actors in LGBTQ roles might start by looking at the broader issue of representation. That is, behind the camera, or in the writer's room. In the British film God's Own Country, leading men Josh O'Connor and Alec Secaranow worked closely with director Francis Lee, who based the story of two farm workers falling in love on his own experiences growing up in rural Yorkshire. The actors identify as straight, but the director's own sexuality and life experience feed into every second of the film, which foregoes expository dialogue for hungry, aggressive sex scenes and brooding pockets of silence. The actors were also put to work on Yorkshire farms, doing 12 hours a day for 3 months. One scene in which O'Connor's character inspects a cow by going elbow deep into its rectum involved no Hollywood fakery. Elsewhere, filming was interrupted when a sheep on the farm went into labor, and O'Connor assisted in the delivery. There's no doubt that these actors became completely enmeshed in the culture, the work and the sweat and the sex and the particular way you lift the gate on the south-facing side of the field so it doesn't swing back, because it was all specific to Lee's experiences growing up gay in a working-class farming community. So it was with Rocket Man. For his role in the Elton John biopic, Welsh actor Taron Egerton spent time with the singer, exploring John's complex relationship with body image and understanding how a potent cocktail of emotional neglect and substance abuse facilitated his toxic relationship with his manager, John Reed. Some may find the film's boast of being an uncensored look at the singer's life paper thin. His sex addiction is largely left to the imagination. But there's no doubt Egerton earned praise for his portrayal of a gay man in a perpetual state of flux. Engagement with queer themes is how heterosexual creatives further deepen their understanding of queer culture. It's how Barry Jenkins was able to explore the specific queerness at the heart of Moonlight, despite being a straight director. The 2016 film, based on the play In the Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue, by Terrell Alvin McCraney, is breathtakingly intimate and considered in its handling of black masculinity and queerness. Speaking to me on the phone, McCraney explains how the two work together. Luckily for me and Barry, he grew up not even 3 blocks away from me. And the great deal of what I'd gone through, he'd gone through himself, even though he didn't identify as queer. He saw the bullies, he saw how people reacted. I didn't have to explain to him the brutality of a game called Knock Down, Stay Down because he saw it. And he knew it. I don't think there were any moments in which he needed specific help just because he wasn't gay. In other words, the film was not just a queer film, yet the queerness was a specific one also rooted in class, race, and time, all of which Jenkins understood through his own upbringing. We can't turn away every time someone who doesn't identify directly wants to make a project, McCraney says. We don't have such a plethora of representation that we can afford to do that at this point. If you make a movie about Mars, and you know nothing about Mars, you do the research or find someone who does. Moonlight's queerness examined a specific black masculinity, but on Netflix's Tales of the City, a remake of the 1993 limited series, the breadth of the LGBTQ community is laid bare. Speaking to multiple identities within the LGBTQ community, rather than laser focusing on one in particular, comes with its own set of challenges. While Olympia Dukakis returns as the trans matriarch Anna Madrigal 25 years after last playing the role, her being cisgender might not sit right with a modern audience. To address that, the show cast a trans actor, Jen Richards, to play her in flashbacks. I think what's happening now, what matters so much, is that narratives around the trans community can become more sophisticated, more nuanced, because they know us, Richards told Variety. The series' all-queer writing staff has also ensured that nuance and understanding are at the core of everything that happens on the show. But as Pose star Billy Porter points out, there are double standards for queer actors, who have to watch while straight actors beat them to queer roles, while casting directors are often unable to perceive them as capable of playing straight parts. If flamboyantly wasn't in the description of the character, no one would see me ever for anything, which wouldn't be so enraging if it went the other direction, but it doesn't, Porter said. Straight men playing gay, everyone wants to give them an award. The actor Darren Criss, a heterosexual who has played gay men in both Glee and the assassination of Gianni Versace, American Crime Story, has since said he will no longer play LGBTQ parts because he did not want to perpetuate the problem of representation in the industry. Criss's decision might not have been wholly necessary, though, as there are larger issues at play. Bigger names are more likely to secure funding, in theory anyway, and a dearth of out actors, no openly gay man has ever won the Best Actor Oscar, means the cycle will continue to feed itself. Kate Blanchett, while promoting Carol, defended her right to play parts that don't correlate with her own lived experience, but admitted last year it was very difficult film to get up, despite her star power. Financiers told her that only 12-year-old boys went to see movies. There's also the unfortunate reality, while all this goes on, many actors see remaining in the closet or choosing personal discretion around their sexuality is largely beneficial. If nobody can pin down who you are outside of work, it prevents you from being seen through a very narrow lens. Richard Madden, discussing his role as John Reed in Rocketman, recently told the New York Times that his sexuality isn't something he's willing to discuss. I just keep my personal life personal. I've never talked about my relationships. On one hand, it's exciting to see pictures linking him to other men in the industry. A gay bi man playing a gay part is progress. On the other, that ambiguity sounds an awful lot like Matt Damon's notion of a none of your damn business utopia. So, it's no wonder that the issue continues to rear its head, and there's no clear answer in sight when we talk about who should play whom. Until more out actors are open with their sexuality, we won't have progress. Until we get more films made where queerness isn't freaking out studio heads, we won't have progress either. Until the next film about a queer black person isn't called The Next Moonlight, we aren't out of the woods. Let's assume then that until broader progress is made, straight men will continue to play queer roles. How they do it, and not that they do it in the first place, could make all the difference. Well, anyway, that was what I was thinking about today. I wanted to sort of give you all sort of a two sides of the story, and it's something I think not easily answered. Like many of the questions that are being asked across a broad spectrum of topics these days, I think it's always best to really consider these things before you have a knee-jerk response, because these kinds of questions maybe aren't as cut and dried as you might think. Some people might think they are. I tend to think that they are not. But anyway, let's jump into it now and see what people are saying in the chat here. I'll jump right in, and yes, I do have letters. Willow says, Happy Father's Day to Pa Burnett, Dick the bartender. Well, Willow, I'm sure wherever he is now, he will be very happy, and I'm sure you would have loved him. He would have, I'm sure, loved you as well. But thank you for that. Willow goes on to say, the same question that I've asked for Mother's Day. If you can choose one fictional dad as your parent, who would it be? It better not be Kirk, since he's kind of an absent father who's always away at work. You know who I would pick? I would pick Richard Harris as Marcus Aurelius in Gladiator. I think if I was his son, we could have done great things. That's the first thing that popped into my mind. I don't know if that's probably the best thing that ever popped into my mind. Maybe Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams. That's the other one that popped into my mind. Yeah. I think those are the two. Marcus Aurelius or Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams. There you go. Dancing Dog sends in a tip and says, Happy Father's Day to all fathers out there. Is it acceptable? In my opinion, it depends what type of role we're talking about. Tom Hanks and Sean Penn won Oscars portraying gay men. Hanks won an Oscar portraying a retarded man like Cliff Robertson. It would be tough to find a mentally retarded actor who would be better able to take direction or learn from a script, etc. Sexuality, well, closeted actors have been playing straight roles for decades. Ethnicity, no. Unless the role is rewritten to accommodate. It would be silly to put a person in makeup a la Joel Grey and Remo Williams these days. If it's a farce, sure, as long as ethnicity isn't being made fun of. But this is just my opinion. I'm sure those in the chat would not agree with me. I don't like offending anyone. If someone tells me they're offended by something I've said or done, I apologize sincerely. If someone tells me a film, book, picture offends them, I don't feel I have the right to tell them what they should be offended by. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, Dancing Dog. It's tough. It's not as cut and dried as I think some people think it is. Casper Arrow is here. Hello, Rob. Would it be fair or right to call Marlon Brando the most important actor of all time? This is based on his influence, legacy, and importance in bringing method acting to Hollywood and forever changing screen acting. Obviously, my favorite actor. Um, well, I think in terms of his influence, you could make an argument. I mean, actors all love Brando. And I think absolutely he did change Hollywood forever. Um, I mean, the roles. By the way, I have an awesome Hot Toys Marlon Brando figure from the Wild One, just as an aside. Um, I, uh, uh, I, I should open it up and put it on the shelf. I, uh, again, it depends. I mean, I think Marlon Brando, if you asked him, might say Laurence Olivier might have been important to him, or something like Charles Lawton. I just don't know. But I think he's definitely up there. I think Marlon Brando's legend and his ability and talent looms large over Hollywood. I don't know if I could say the most important, but certainly up there. I think that's a question actors would be the best people to answer. But clearly, I mean, his legend looms very, very large. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, after Peter Dinklage DPing Game of Thrones, I thought we would see more roles in movies for little people. That hasn't happened so far. Do you think that that's because Game of Thrones was a fantasy series and that is one extra removed from our world? I do. I do. I mean, I think that, again, it also goes to, like what was he in? The Station Agent, a movie I really, really liked. I think the problem is, I think, and this is no slight to, I don't even know what the proper term these days to use. I'll say little person. Percentage-wise, how many people? I mean, I would cast Peter Dinklage in almost any role. I love Peter Dinklage, and I think you probably could get away with it. However, I would say that in my experience of my life and the 50 years I've been on this planet, I just haven't interacted with a lot of little people, which I think that there's, I just by that, if I was in the 25 stories, the 25 books I have here that I would love to adapt into movies, none of them have little people protagonists. However, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't hire Peter Dinklage or another little person just to put them in there. I think Peter Dinklage could play a lot of different roles. I mean, I could cast him as a best friend or a leading man if he was the right character. I mean, I think that would be interesting. I think in terms of Game of Thrones, yeah, it worked out because it's very interesting if you watch that, because he makes jokes at his own character's expense, but Tyrion Lannister is just Tyrion Lannister. You don't look at Tyrion Lannister and go, oh, he's a little person. I mean, it becomes plot because Tyrion himself brings it up. But like during the Battle of Blackwater, he was a statistician. You're like, oh my God, is he going to be able to save King's Landing from Stannis Baratheon's invasion force? Who knows? I wasn't thinking to myself, oh, I wonder if the little person's going to save the city. No, I'm thinking that scheming, smart Tyrion Lannister is going to go out there. And I think that's pretty great. I think that speaks to Peter Dinklage's skill as an actor. Because I think an actor's greatest ability is to make you forget that you're watching a real person and immerse you in that character as an audience member so utterly that character, you follow that character. And I think Dinklage's performance, I mean, that's why I have a Tyrion Lannister action figure on my shelf right there, holding up his cup, because I love that character and I love his performance of that character. Picard Sucks sent in a $4.99 super chat and says, you should have many more subs than you do. Well, you got to start somewhere. But I appreciate that, Picard. Sucks, and you and I definitely park our shuttlecraft in the same shuttle bay. John Ortiz is here and sends in a tip and says, Tom Selleck was 60 when he played Jesse Stone. In the Robert Parker series, Jesse Stone was in his late 30s. Selleck did a great job, so good that 8 more TV movies followed on CBS. Listen, John, I'm with you, man. Tom Cruise doesn't look anything like Jack Reacher is described in those books. Not at all. But I like the two Jack Reacher movies. But yeah, I think a good actor can, they have to make you believe. Make you believe. I'll tell you something. So this project that I'm developing now with it's an adaptation of a book, and I'm working with the author. The author just came at me and gave me a really interesting, a fundamental change to the story based on the time frame of certain things happening. And that time frame change pushed the timeline in the book about 20 years, which means that the main character has to be about 20 years older to make the story work. And I was like, and I have a couple of actors in mind, very specific actors to play these parts. And I'm like, all right, we can make that work. And so I'm all about that. So yeah, John, I think actors, it really comes down to, it's a collaboration. The filmmakers have to pick actors they think can do the best job. And I think what's really interesting in the Robert Parker series, in the books, I'll give you an example. Does Jesse Stone have to be in his late 30s? Like if you upped his age to 60, Morgan Freeman was older than the character of Alex Cross as portrayed in James Patterson's books. But in Along Came a Spider and Kiss the Girls, it works. I mean, obviously Morgan Freeman got too old to continue to play Alex Cross when Rob Cohen directed Cross, but so they recast. But you can make these things work, and things are malleable. You can move them around. Stubble McShave sent in a tip and said, I saw Miriam Margolyes on Graham Norton. I love Graham Norton. She said that as a lesbian, she despised kissing women on stage. The reason was concern over the fact that the other actor might think she fancied her. She's great on the Graham Norton show. I love Graham Norton. I'll tell you, to be honest, one of my dreams in life is to one day be a guest on the Graham Norton show to promote a whatever project that I'm involved with. That's a dream in life. I had a dream in life. I wanted to make a movie that was in Fangoria magazine, and lo and behold, The Hills Run Red was. Oh, that reminds me. For anybody interested, The Hills Run Red, a movie I produced, just came out on Blu-ray this week from Shout Factory and Scream Factory, with 6.5 hours of brand new special features, brought to you by myself and the film's director, Dave Parker. Any chance to keep promoting? I know. I'll get over it one day. But hey, no one else is promoting. They didn't even send out any review copies to any of the online sites. So hey. Picard Sucks sends in another super chat and says, careful, Rob. They're going to try and cancel you. Well, they try. I don't know why, though. I mean, I think anybody who watches my show, I'm trying to promote what I think is the kind of discourse that we need. Problems are very three-dimensional, and lately I've seen them reduced to very one-dimensional problems, and it's bothering me. So, Roberto Suarez here. Roberto Suarez is here, and Roberto is a father. He has a very fine family up in Portland, Oregon. Happy Father's Day to fellow dads in the Post-Geek Singularity community. Also, a special shout-out to my father, the first Bond fan I knew, who instilled in me a love for the Bond franchise. Roberto, what a great message. Thank you for that. Stubble McShave goes on to say, Miriam Margolyes is great on the Graham Norton show. She has no filter, such as when she mentioned creaming in her pants from seeing Laurence Olivier and giving a blowjob to an American soldier in the spur of the moment. You should check out clips on YouTube. Well, she sounds like my kind of lady. Absolutely. Mark C. sends in a tip and says, society right now is telling us a black and white man have a different life informed by their race. If you race swap a character, you change their history. Is a character that was originally white still the same character if you make them black? I think they're not. But, my favorite example of that is when Frank Darabont changed the race of Red in The Shawshank Redemption. In the original story, Red is not a black man. But Frank Darabont switched out Red with Morgan Freeman. And there's that great moment, why do they call you Red? Maybe it's because I'm Irish. That was in the book. He retained that, and I thought that was all that needed to be said. But I think black and white men do have different lives informed by their race. I think anybody does. People are different. They have different lives based on a lot of different things: economic status, education, where they grew up regionally, and certainly skin color is a big factor, especially in this country. A black person's experience is very different in America than a white person's. But then again, there's all kinds of different white people all over the country that have very different experiences of life too. So I do think that you can make those changes. In the case of Shawshank Redemption, I think that the race swap was not a big deal, but I think you can, and I think it can be interesting. Look at Marvel Comics. You know, Nick Fury was a white dude until the Ultimate Universe, and then they actually based the new Nick Fury on Sam Jackson's likeness. And then what ends up happening? Sam Jackson plays Nick Fury in the MCU. So, I mean, I would say sometimes, not to take anything away from David Hasselhoff's portrayal of Nick Fury, and not to take anything away from Jim Stranko's portrayal of Nick Fury in his work that he did, which is great, by the way. But I do think that Sam Jackson and the Nick Fury in the Ultimates universe was pretty badass. So again, Lior's here. American culture has been hijacked by identity politics and political correctness. People from outside the U.S. look at Hollywood and think you've all gone mad. Well, we all have all gone mad. And I think, look, I don't have a problem with identity politics and political correctness. My problem is it's all superficial and one-dimensional. And all of the identity politics and political correctness is so knee-jerk, and it's just not considered, and it's all based on feelings, what I feel at this time, and it's not really based on the reality of the universe. That's what bothers me the most. The conversations that people are having, I listen to them, I'm like, what are you talking about? Do you not live in the real world? And I think America is becoming increasingly disconnected. There was once the age of reason. I think America has begun, we're going down a path into the age of unreason. And I don't understand it at all. My favorite thing that I've heard recently is Elizabeth told me that one of her classmates is a self-professed Marxist, but yet has a full scholarship to school. And I guess getting a full scholarship is kind of Marxist, but then share it with everybody else. It's very interesting. It's very strange to me. But I agree with you, Lior. American culture it's been nutty. Alexander Wilson's here, said, you said Ghost in the Shell needed ScarJo as a box office draw back in 2017. That movie had like a $150 million budget and made $169 million worldwide. Would that movie made less if Karen Fukuhara was the star instead of ScarJo? Who was the box office draw besides The Rock? Well, I would say this, Alexander. I think Ghost in the Shell didn't make so much money because it wasn't very good. I was very disappointed. I mean, things still have to be good. And I think it only made as much money as it did because Scarlett Johansson was in it. Karen Fukuhara, I don't know. I don't know how she would have been in the role. Maybe it could have been better. I just think that the movie was there's, again, I think the big problem with bringing anime to America and doing American adaptations of Japanese anime is that our sensibility, the Western sensibility, something dies in the translation. And I call it whimsy. Like, I can't imagine an American director going, I want to do a live-action remake of Howl's Moving Castle here in America. Now, does that mean I think nobody could do it? No, I think somebody could probably do it. But I think it would be extremely hard. Would I want to see an American version of Spirited Away or Princess Mononoke or My Neighbor Totoro or Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind? I mean, I don't know. I think that we have a certain impulse to try and, again, make things more realistic and grounded and bleed out that whimsy out of what's going on. I mean, even when I say whimsy too, it's even in a John Woo film. Like whether you're watching Bullet in the Head or The Killer or Hard Boiled or A Better Tomorrow, his operatic style and his heightened sense of, which, sometimes there is no There's no verisimilitude there. But I love John Woo's work. But the operatic nature of his crime thrillers, the first thing they did when he made Hard Target, they bring John Woo to America. They give him his first job directing Hard Target with Jean-Claude Van Damme. And what do? Once he puts the movie together, they can't deal with the John Woo-isms, and they go in and they recut it, and they turn it into something conventional. They take out the very essence of the man they hired to make their movie for them. It's crazy. And I think that's the real problem there. Alexander goes on to say, the main issue people have is that people like the characters don't get the opportunities to be even consideration for the role. I was denied a job because I was black, and the company had to settle a racial discrimination lawsuit that showed they hire any minorities even when they are qualified for the jobs. Finding out that because I'm a black man, there are opportunities, jobs, and money that will be denied to me because that's how the system is set up can be very demoralizing. Well, I think you just nailed where our system needs to change. You shouldn't be denied a job because of your race, ever. Now, that said, I would go on to say that if there's more qualified applicants or people that are, I want to hire the best people for the jobs. Now, you bring up a really good point. If you haven't had the opportunity to get in the room where you can get those jobs because you're black, I think that we need to make sure as a culture that you do have those opportunities, because here's what I would say. Your perspective, if I'm in a profession where black voices have not been heard, I would say that profession would benefit. That's why I always say would benefit from having more black employees, because what is great when you have a population of people that hasn't traditionally been heard, hearing their voices can only make your perspective stronger. Getting people whose experience, mostly experience, the experience and voice you would bring to something would only make the company stronger and more aware, and thus better able to navigate the world. And I honestly believe that. And that's what's really important. Now, when it comes down to, unfortunately, would you hire somebody? If there were two people that were of equal ability, and if your company was lacking black voices, I would hire a black man or black woman if the people had equal ability. Especially if my company did not have a lot of black employees, because I think that the black experience could only add to our overall strength as a company. But then it gets dicey. It gets dicey because then are you discriminating against the white counterpart? But I would say that, well, if your company is already predominantly white, well, hiring somebody of equal ability, I would say you're not being discriminated. There isn't reverse discrimination there, because what you're looking for, the thing that made you advance, was the very thing that we needed, which was a black voice, because we didn't have enough. And that's why, I find it, one of the things that bothers me about this is you always hear like, oh, great, so, if you're going to have minority hires or you're going to have a quota system, there's reverse discrimination. Well, the problem is, it isn't discrimination. It's that there's already been tons of white people there. And what we didn't have the black voices. We didn't have the Latino voices. We didn't have Asian voices or indigenous peoples, whatever it is. I guarantee you there's less of those voices, and we need more of those voices, because otherwise we're never going to understand these difficult situations that we're dealing with right now in our cities, because we've dealt with one voice for too long. And we need those multiple voices. We need everybody's voice because it strengthens us. At least that's kind of how I think about it. Alexander Wilson goes on to say, did I miss? I missed. Hang on. I want to make sure that Jason S. sends in a tip and says, people talking about blackface don't even seem to understand what it is. It's not a white person just painting their face black. It's painting it black, putting on large white or red lips, and doing a caricature of a black person as an idiot. Jason, you're right about that. And sometimes not always as an idiot. But yes, it was always a caricature. Always a caricature. And who needs that? No verisimilitude. Alexander Wilson keeps going on. He sends in another tip and says, Academy Award winner Monique, who I went to college with her, and she is super nice, said that she had roles that she accepted taken away from her because she didn't thank a certain producer. So that tells you the best don't get the roles. Well, it also tells you that people in Hollywood can be monumental assholes, which is a whole nother issue in itself. But yeah, that's true. Alexander goes on to say, Cat Williams said in an interview that he was working on a Viacom project back in 2009, and one of the producers said that Dave Chappelle would be perfect for this role. Another producer in the room said, never say that name around here again. Well, Cat Williams then said that Dave Chappelle was ostracized from CBS Viacom, and any project associated with the company couldn't hire him to work. How can the best actors be cast when you have things like this happen? Well, again, it's not so cut and dried, because remember, Dave Chappelle did walk away from the Chappelle Show, a very successful show. And in terms of the business of Hollywood, people are like, why would you do that? So that happens too. There's again many different nuances. And that happens, by the way, to everybody. It's not just Dave Chappelle, or it's not just because you're black or white or red or green or whatever. If you don't play the game, remember, the Hollywood game is a ridiculous, insane. It's just nuts. It's an insane place to be, and there is all of this insanity constantly going on, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. Jason S. goes on and says, what exactly is the constant obsession out there in Hollywood with the LGBT community? It's very small. It's a very small niche group that people seem to obsess about 24/7. There are millions of other niche groups out there, like trans species groups or flat earthers. Well, I think that like any artistic endeavor, in Hollywood, there is a large percentage of people, as far as the business is concerned, compared to other businesses in the world. There are a large percentage of LGBTQ people. They're just drawn to the arts. And I as I said, I've been friends with LGBTQ people since I was 13, since I was young, and I had older friends because of the Seattle film community, and people are just attracted to the arts. So they talk about what they know. And one of the things that people have seen is, like, when you work in the arts, like during the 80s, many people saw the gay community decimated by AIDS. So a lot of people saw their friends, especially in LA and New York and in other cities, but LA and New York were especially hard hit, where people lost a lot of friends and coworkers and collaborators. And I think that's part of the reason. Definitely part of the reason. Tmork sent in a super chat and said, Sean Connery would be a great Fasher. I'm a good Fasher. I can't do Sean Connery like that, but that's pretty funny. Mark C. sends in another super chat and said, if I had to pick a fictional father, I'd choose Jonathan Kent as portrayed by John Schneider. I think it's an honest portrayal of a dad. I agree with you. I like John Schneider as Jonathan Kent. He was good. Glenn Ford, too. I love Glenn Ford as Jonathan Kent. Really did. Gerald sends in a tip and says, hello, Rob. In light of today's discussion, I want to recommend Predestination to the Post-Geek Singularity. It's a time travel brain teaser with a heart. I wanted to talk about Sarah Snook's acting in this movie, but I think it's best not to know anything before watching. Well, Gerald, I have to tell you, this movie comes up a lot. I love Predestination. Love it, love it, love it. Made by the same people who made Daybreakers, the Spielberg brothers. I love Predestination. It is based on a classic, short, very short, Robert Heinlein story called All You Zombies. I don't think it's surprising to anyone to know that I own Predestination on Blu-ray. I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it so much. And it's one of those movies where you're asking yourselves, if you've never heard of Predestination or you've never seen it, watch it, but do not read anything about it. Just take my word on this. Take Gerald's word on this. Just go in there and read or watch Predestination knowing nothing. Nothing. Alexander Wilson is back and says, Hollywood has not even been close to being progressive in any category compared to sports. Baseball created modern-day streaming back in 2000. Disney brought the company from brought the company from baseball to create Disney Plus. Sports was way ahead of Hollywood on that. Oh, I agree. But remember, sports was ahead of Hollywood because sports knew they could make more money being more progressive. Fortunato sends in a tip and says the Robservatory is like the Twilight Zone episode for toys. 5 characters in search of an exit. # free the toys. Just kidding. Good job on the civil discourse, RMB. Well, thanks, Fortunato. I try. You know, I again, this topic, I've been thinking about this a lot because people keep bringing it up. And I was like, you know, I worry in this day and age about discussing topics like this because they can get polarizing, and the danger of wading into these waters is tremendous, to be honest. But I think it's worth discussing in this way. That's why, you know, finding different articles and different people having different things to say, and I try to find articles to read that were nuanced, and I think these are important issues to discuss, and they're not necessarily easy answers. And I can't stand it when people are like, nope, it should be this way, or nope, it should be that way. I'm like, really? Because I see it like I grapple with it in my own life. So, and I argue with myself. So if I'm arguing with myself, there's got to be more to it than just one side or another. I hate that. It's like, come on, man. We can do better. But I really appreciate you saying that. Alexander Wilson goes on and says, America has never been more disconnected. I know, man. Did you forget segregation and Jim Crow? Black people had to be escorted by the National Guard to attend school in certain states. Rob, that was a very ignorant comment. Which comment? I mean, I totally agree with you. I think about that all the time, about segregation. I mean, yeah. Oh, you mean about Hollywood, about sports in Hollywood? Well, I mean, come on. It was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, too. But yes, I think that I didn't mean to come off that way, so I apologize. Lancelot Narian says, you know what they should put an end to? They should really put a stop to actors not playing the characters they're supposed to be playing. Not naming names, but Patrick fucking Stewart. Come on, man. Well, the problem is, it's the writers, as one of these authors in the articles pointed out, it begins and ends with the writing staff. The writing staff betrayed Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart didn't. Alexander Wilson says, the company that settled for racial discrimination said the problem was the fault of their manual application system. 124 blacks applied and 0 got hired. Basically, they put black applications aside. This is what we have to deal with. It's awful. That is awful. And by the way, they were lying. You know, it shouldn't matter. When you're applying to a company, who, as a matter of fact, people should, if that's a problem, people should be able to blindly submit applications, and why should that matter? I mean, I think it's terrible that happened. That's just, it's such, again, it's not right. That's not what should be happening at all. By the way, let me jump over, and I got letters, people. I got letters, and I got to tell you, Ian Samuels, always knocking them out of the park, but this one in particular, you know I'm going to love this one. Rob and fellow Robservationists, this is a letter I've been putting off. I believe that in your words that we park our shuttles in the same shuttle bay, but I fear that this letter may be a sign that I may be starting the self-destruct sequence on my shuttle. This letter is about, Star Trek, the motion picture. Star Trek is at its best when it's character-driven stories. The fans fell in love with the original series through its characters, through Spock, Scotty, McCoy, Chekhov, and Sulu, Uhura, and of course the Enterprise's Captain Kirk. But then Phase 2 failed to launch, and Paramount suggested instead that they should make a movie. And so Gene Roddenberry and director Robert Wise decided they wanted to make a special effects-heavy spectacular. This was done much through an effects-driven story. This was a move away from the character-driven stories that had made Star Trek great. The best, or in this case, worst example of this is a sequence in the movie where the Enterprise goes to warp and a potato-like asteroid somehow gets stuck in the warp field. The scene suddenly changes into a ridiculous slow-mo as Kirk orders Chekhov to fire torpedoes at the asteroid. Decker, I'll be coming back to him, insists Chekhov belays that order and instead fire a photon torpedo. This, as Decker explains, is that the phasers now draw their power from the warp nacelles, meaning that firing them at warp would cause an overload in the warp reactor, causing an explosion. A ridiculous and seriously stupid plot point to have this effects-heavy scene. Au contraire, my friend. Au contraire. Do you know what that scene showed? Do you know what that scene set up? It showed that after Kirk replaced Decker as captain of the Enterprise, that Kirk's unfamiliarity with the Enterprise, as Decker said, seriously jeopardized the mission. That was a graphic portrayal of it. And when Decker came in and said, "Sir, the Enterprise's redesign channels phasers through the main engines. And when the main engines conked out, the phasers wouldn't have worked." And so Kirk realized that he was wrong. And Kirk said, "You saved the ship." "I know I did, sir." And it was that whole scene then served to inform the character battle between the two of them. And I think, again, but let me go on. Now, admittedly, particularly in the special edition, the scenes with V'ger are indeed spectacular, and somewhere hidden beneath the special effects, there's maybe a decent story. There are other problems, issues that have been a number of times the cast have been vocal about. Due to the effects-driven story, the characters have become secondary. A number of times the cast would suggest how their characters would act, only to have Wise shut them down, telling them they're just actors, and their job is to do what he as the director tells them to do. Many were frustrated at these shackles. We then get the characters of Decker and Ilea, two characters that were going to be in Phase 2, but in some desperate act to crowbar Phase 2 in, despite its failure, Roddenberry added those two characters. The problem is they are treated in the movie as if we, the viewer, have had at least 3 years with them, just as we had with Kirk and his crew. The problem is that we didn't, and they're new to us. I also agree with your assessment of the big jackets in Wrath of Khan, but there was a story point to them. Khan's quote about revenge being a best served cold, and that it is very cold in space. The big bulky jackets were supposed to be a visual emphasis on this line. Yeah, but not on the starship, just like they wore jackets when they left the Enterprise at the end of motion picture. But as you said, they look ridiculous, but the uniforms in Star Trek the Motion Picture look like they've turned up to work in their pajamas. Also, Shatner had to put on weight and had to wear a corset to fit in the uniform. The choice to drop all the color out of them was taken to ensure that the characters didn't draw attention away from the fancy special effects. Well, that's not all entirely true, by the way. There's a great book about the making of Star Trek the Motion Picture, not written by Susan Sackett, but it's great. So with Roddenberry and Wise's insistence on effects-driven rather than character-driven story, and with the cast being shackled by a director who would not allow them to have the freedoms they were used to play their characters, all these issues are why many, myself included, did not enjoy the movie. But as a fellow Star Trek fan, I'm glad you can see past these issues and enjoy it. As much as I'm glad that there are fans who can see past the issues of JJ's Star Trek films, Picard, and even Discovery to enjoy them. That is one of the many special things we're lucky to have in our inclusive Post-Geek Singularity. Well, that I agree with you with, Ian. But I would dare say that Star Trek the Motion Picture could very well be one of the most significant character-driven Star Trek stories ever told, because it's about Spock coming to grips with the value of emotion, which is something that he had been denying himself his whole life, and especially in the director's cut, when Spock is crying. The tears is for us, Spock. No, I weep for V'ger as I would a brother. And back to the story where the scene where Spock, after mind melding with V'ger, takes Kirk's hand and says, "This simple feeling is beyond V'ger's comprehension." It's Spock coming to grips with the fact that even though he's prided himself on being a logic-driven uber Vulcan the whole time, and he's been fighting his human half, he's realized that his human half has value as well, and that understanding and embracing emotion, which is something V'ger doesn't have, can be very, very valuable. And you definitely see this transition in Nimoy's performance in Star Trek II. He's much more serene when Kirk comes to his quarters, and I would not presume to debate you. That is wise. I mean, he's got a sense of humor now. I mean, he always had a sense of humor. He could tell a joke. Spock was a very funny guy. It's just that, he kept it under control. But I think that Star Trek the Motion Picture is, in fact, while it has a lot of effects, it has a very character-driven story at the heart of it. But I could go on and on and on, and I will spare you. Because you know how I can go on and on and on. Let's see. Emil Johansson is here. Hello, Rob. I want to post a controversial letter without focusing on politics of the real world, but fiction and entertainment. I want to talk about the plans for Disney for making a Disney Plus show about the character of Kamala Khan. The problem I have with this product is that it doesn't even exist yet, is that it seems like a perfect character to tackle moral issues and lead the way to a better society with representation and defying prejudices. However, I cannot figure out how they will do that, and it seems like whatever path they would take with her character, people will dislike it. Kamala Khan is an Inhuman, which were featured in an oppressed minority in the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., kind of like X-Men. She is also Muslim, and let's be clear, ever since 9/11, a lot of people have prejudices against Muslims, and many would argue rightfully so. She's also Middle Eastern and female, not a white male person. So obviously, you could spin her stories to be stories of representation and diversity. And I suppose this means it's doomed to fail, since so many people review bomb everything that focuses on political messages instead of telling compelling stories. One issue, for example, is whether or not she should wear a hijab. The obvious answer is no, she doesn't wear one in the comics, and I know why. It's not trendy. It's a symbol of oppression according to liberal values. But already there you make a mistake. If I was in charge, I would put a hijab on her, not because I want people to wear hijabs or because I believe in that, but because it would be realistic. Real representation doesn't mean a Hollywood fantasy where gay people are priests and have no internal struggles with their faith, for example. I know this would be controversial and cause outrage from a lot of people, and I don't need you to agree with me on that. The point I'm getting is, I think Marvel is taking their biggest risk with this character and possibly setting themselves up for failure. Diversity, LGBTQ, feminism, religion, prejudice, Islam, etc. are all things very sensitive right now, and it seems impossible to please everyone. No matter where you tread, some group is going to be angry with your decision. I suspect that a story with Kamala Khan would be a story of purity, meaning they'd want to send a positive message to make a positive story. This is not a good decision, in my opinion. Joker was a movie, even if it ripped off Taxi Driver, that made $1 billion despite making people feel sick watching it. It had no moral compass to teach people. It had a bad person doing bad things for bad reasons in a bad world, and it made you feel completely bad. Man of Steel is immensely popular. I don't pretend it's underrated because unless you are in the wrong circles, people could pray to that movie and it wouldn't be weird. But what was the controversy about this movie again? They muddled Superman. Superman acted like a human in this movie. He raged and wrecked a truck when someone shamed him at a bar, and he had to make a difficult choice he didn't like, something that did not pass any purity test. See, Superman doesn't even know he's Superman when he does that at the bar. You know, he has no idea who he is. He just knows he's different. It's like to think that he's to pillory him for that is like the guy doesn't even know about his heritage yet. He doesn't even know what he's supposed to do. He's teaching a bully a lesson in that scene. The point I want to make is that there's something compelling about stories that are not sending positive messages to people. Snapping people's necks because you have to is not a pretty message, even if it's philosophically right. Seeing a person do horrible things but still being able to see some sort of logic in his madness is horrifying, and yet it made $1 billion USD. Stories that try and teach people about what is right and wrong are not compelling anymore. And if Marvel is doing a Kamala Khan story only for the reason of telling a positive message, I believe they're setting themselves up for failure. You don't make anyone happy. All you do is divide critics and fans or whatever in political groups based on if they agree with the message or not. This is not what entertainment and fiction's for. It's my belief, but you don't have to agree with me, is that fiction is about weird stories and doesn't need to make sense and doesn't need to educate people on what is right or wrong. I know putting a hijab on her would piss people off and be seen as a crime against humanity, but if I was in charge, I would do it. The future is not necessarily progressive, and that's okay. Well, Emil, look, if I was going to do that, if I was going to do that story, again, I'm always looking for verisimilitude. And one of the things that we've certainly done in the West for a very long time is vilify our Muslim population. Now, that's not to say, I mean, I find a lot of that culture, a lot of what you find in the Quran and the Hadiths and things like that to be oppressive towards certain groups of people, women, homosexuals. There's a lot to be said, but the same is true of Christianity as well. I mean, let's face it, there's a lot to go around with people, and I think that I think it could be interesting if Kamala Khan came from a traditional Muslim family. I think that would be, it's interesting because when you bring up these kinds of issues, it's really hard to do that. Let's see just how progressive people can be, how they like. What if she comes from a family that practices Sharia law? I mean, that would be interesting. If you really want to delve into culture, I like stories where we look into traditional cultures. I think that's interesting, but I don't know. I don't know how they're going to approach it. I think it could be a good show though, and it really depends who's going to write it. Like the article said that I read earlier, it really depends who's writing it, what the representation is in the writers' room, and yeah, I think that's the way to go. Evan Newman is here. Evan says, "Hi Rob, my tipped question on Stream Elements didn't get through to today's show. Well, I'm sorry about that. So I thought I'd send it here. Did you see this week's Real Time with Bill Maher? I saw his new rules, which I don't know what I think about it. It has a fantastic discussion with Malcolm Nance and Andrew Sullivan on what is happening in today's culture." Oh, I got to watch that. I love Andrew Sullivan. I know people are going to be like, "You love Andrew Sullivan?" Yes, I love Andrew Sullivan. I love listening to him. Does it mean I agree with everything he says? Hell no. But I think he has an interesting way. I think he's a keen thinker, and I like hearing him talk, whether I agree with him or not. Best discussion I've seen on the topic recently. I highly recommend it to anyone who may be interested. Thanks, Evan Newman. Well, Evan, thank you. I didn't know that he was on Bill Maher, but I will totally watch that. Let's see. I'm going to save this one till last. Not till last. I've got a couple long letters I got to get to. Omar94 is here. Hi, Rob. One thing I find interesting about movies is how actors get put on a pedestal, so to speak. Don't get me wrong, I think actors are important in movies, but not the most important thing. This makes me wonder why actors get so much attention, in that many times a movie can get altered to appease an actor's needs and demands. I wonder this because I was reading about how much crew members actually hated Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger during the production of the movie The Marrying Man. I read how Baldwin threw tantrums, threw chairs, and smashed camera lenses. Basinger would always be late on set, and how she had really ridiculous demands. According to the movie's writer, Neil Simon, the two of them also told everyone what lines of dialogue they would and wouldn't say. Another scenario was during the movie The Golden Child. Originally, the script was called The Rose of Tibet and was more serious. Described as a Raymond Chandler movie with supernatural elements. Intended to be a serious adventure drama, Mel Gibson was in mind to star. However, when Eddie Murphy got cast instead, the script had to be rewritten into a comedy. Murphy would later admit the original and more serious script was far better, calling the final film, quote, "a piece of shit." Oh, come on. You've been on set, so you probably know more about this type of thing. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, Omar, I mean, here's the thing. Like it or not, when you watch a movie, what people are watching in the movies are the characters. You know, it's interesting. If you're a director or a producer or an editor or anything, the people that work the shortest amount of time on a film are the actors. Even all the departments, the art department, costume department, they all start before and they're all there after actors leave. So actors are the people that work on movies usually the least. Yet, they're front and center on camera. So when you watch a movie, you're watching those actors. And you need those actors because they're bankable and they help sell the film. And so actors also have a tremendous amount of pressure put on them. I mean, imagine they're hired and they have to act. A lot of actors are nervous. They're very insecure. And, you know, if they've got you got Neil Simon writing The Marrying Man, I mean, everyone freaks out. They freak out because the amount of pressure. I mean, they're supposed to go out and every time they walk. Imagine if every day you went to work, every day you had to be perfect. And you had to be perfect in front of a bunch of people. And all of those people, all of the people that are working are waiting for you to be perfect. Everything that they're doing is contingent upon what you do. So there is a lot of power that actors wield. And, you know, I think that's being pulled back because the days of diva actors nowadays, there's just not as much money. There's not as much exposure. The business is different, so people don't put up with that behavior. But, yeah, it's a good question, though. It's definitely a good question. You also have your recommendations. You said I have 2 recommendations to give you, your moderators and the viewers, for movies I think are underappreciated. My first recommendation is the 1933 musical called Footlight Parade, starring James Cagney. It starts a little slow at the beginning, but it picks up. When Disney's Hollywood Studios used to have the great movie ride, Footlight Parade was one of the movies shown as part of the ride. My second recommendation is a 1957 movie called An Affair to Remember. which is a great movie, starring Cary Grant. It was directed by Leo McCarey, who also made Duck Soup and The Awful Truth. It is a remake of McCarey's own film, Love Affair, from 1939. Those are my recommendations, Footlight Parade and An Affair to Remember. Thank you for that, Omar. Always good to hear from you. This next one comes from Catherine C. Catherine C. says, Dear Ambassador for Physical Media, I recently saw in one of your videos that you picked up Sony's Columbia Pictures Classic 4K boxed set. That I did. It's right here. Hang on. Would you like me to get it? Here it is. This came out this week. This is Columbia Pictures 4K disc set. So you say, I recently saw in one of your videos that you picked up Sony Columbia Pictures Classic box set, 4K box set. I watched the reviews of the individual films, and it sounds like they did a great job with the transfers, which is great to hear since not all 4K transfers are created equal. Though after watching some unboxing videos, I was a bit disappointed that they stacked the discs atop each other in the cases, because that's a good way to damage the discs. Did they? I didn't even know that. Wow, let's see. To be honest, I took the plastic off and, well, let's see. Here's Dr. Strangelove. Here's the 4K Uh-oh. I didn't mean to do that. Oops. Hold, please. There we go. That was an accident. I did not mean to hit my mute. Let me just set this here. I've taken out Dr. Strangelove. Here is Dr. Strangelove, and let's open it up and see how it looks. In the 4K. There you go. Well, they did not stack the discs like this. They're individual there, and there is a DVD bonus disc here, which is kind of annoying. So, which is odd, I guess. But yeah, the discs seem like they're seem okay to me. There you go. Now, they are stacked in terms of, I mean, if you hold it upright. No, I don't think that that's problematic. Anyway, I was just a bit disappointed that they stacked the. Hey, hang on a second. Something has happened to the sound. Let me just check before I read you this letter. Let me see what I have done. I've done something. I've done something to the sound. Yes, I did. There we go. And, okay. That's better. Let me go to... I was a bit disappointed that they stacked the discs atop each other in the cases, because that's a good way to damage discs. And given the price point, I was hoping they'd be packaged smarter, like the plastic pages you flip that has a disc on either side. Well, Dr. Strangelove does. Aside from that, I heard there was a bit of a hiccup in the Lawrence of Arabia case featuring the wrong bonus disc. But they only gave one disc of special features when they were supposed to give two. But it seems Sony correcting the error and will replace them. But my question regarding the set relates to this. Sony says they only made 8,000 copies of this set, making it rather limited. Oh my God, I didn't know that. And at present, this set is likely the only way to get these titles on 4K. So I ask you, how likely is it that Sony will release these 4K titles individually in the future? And if you think they will, how far off do you think we are from that? I ask because I'm mostly interested in the 4K cuts of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Gandhi, and Lawrence of Arabia. Come on, not Dr. Strangelove. The latter two's 4K transfers were split across 2 discs each so as not to compromise the quality. Whereas I'm satisfied with my Criterion Blu-ray of Dr. Strangelove, I know. And I'm not dying to own Jerry Maguire or A League of Their Own, so at around $110 for tax and shipping, this is kind of pricey for me. But I also don't want to miss out on those 3 titles if indeed this is the only way they will ever be available. I just find it hard to believe that a film as revered as Lawrence of Arabia would only be available in such limited capacity, but then again, it's not been widely available on Blu-ray all the time either. P.S. I saw your whining about movies on Event Horizon, and in it you postulated what a 10-year-old who'd never seen the films it borrowed from may have thought of it. Well, I happen to be one such viewer who saw the film via a VHS rental in 1998 when I was 10, and I liked it at the time. And I did want to see more of the choppy video footage of the previous crew going insane, though mostly because I wasn't sure why it was happening, and I figured it'd provide more clarity and cause, as a 10-year-old horror fan, I loved all that crazy Tom Savini type stuff. I love the atmosphere in the film, and I wasn't bothered by the lack of an antagonist, since I perceived the demonic possession to be ethereal, like non-conscious infection spread through the ship when it crossed into that dimension, similar of how the second act of The King in Yellow is said to have cosmic revelations which drive you insane. Ooh, nice reference. Though I was surprised the film never brought the ship back to that dimension, since it felt like the whole film was leading up to that reveal. I agree. I agree that the characters made lots of dumb decisions, and while I have some nostalgia for it, I agree with Elizabeth that the film squandered its great premise, because it could have been so much more. Well, I agree with you. You know, in terms of, it bothered me that you could get Lawrence of Arabia, like iTunes in 4K, but you couldn't get the physical media. I would imagine that eventually I could see all of these movies being released on 4K. It really depends how much this set sells. Like if this, I like this set. I think it's pretty cool. And if it sells well, they'll put them out. I mean, it all comes down to money. But unfortunately, you know, 4K discs, they sell quickly, man. And who knows if they're ever going to come back. It's just fascinating to me what is happening to physical media. I hope it comes back. I really do. But we'll see. Like, I don't know. I would imagine Lawrence of Arabia and Gandhi hopefully will be out on 4K. I mean, I look forward to checking them out. I haven't even watched them yet, so. But I think they will. Again, it depends how they sell. Christopher McCulloch is here. Mr. Burnett. I guess I'll be putting on my bearskin chapeau and grumbling a little for this one. This will eventually be about Dungeons and Dragons. It has been... Ooh, I like this. It has been some time. Excuse me. Some people hate it when you drink. It has been some time since I read Shogun, but indelible in my mind is one of the most striking and effective openings to a story I've read. I'll summarize it here, but I won't do it justice. Our protagonist is an Englishman, Blackthorn, gangrenous from months at sea and wrecked near a fishing village in feudal Japan. He's dragged before a local warlord for a summary trial. Blackthorn briefly considers escape, but there's nowhere an Englishman can hide in Japan, looking as he does. The local samurai chief, seeing this foreigner as a problem above his pay grade, gives Blackthorn a small reprieve. But to hammer home the strange world this Westerner has entered into, the foreign invader is given safety, but a peasant who rises too quickly to leave is quickly dispatched by the samurai, who continues to hack his body to pieces as Blackthorn is taken away, aghast at a warrior noble of this land. I have yet to see the miniseries. Oh, you need to see it. And I don't know if this scene is preserved, but as far as introducing you to the world goes, few have done it better. The same setup could easily have been a pulp science fiction story with an astronaut landing on Mars. The clash of cultures is so stark. But the story that follows brings the reader and Blackthorn into this insular society, so incalculated on the paramount importance of honor above beyond cheap temporal human life. Your reaction on hearing of this gory interlude might be that this race of people are senselessly cruel. You might even say lawful evil, but once you learn more about how their society works, as Blackthorn does, these acts, while not losing their cruelty, at least are no longer senseless. Shogun is as much about non-Western philosophy and morality as it is about representative of nascent enlightenment, dealing with the world set against allowing these influences in. This is a dynamic I think we see playing out now in our speculative fiction, as odd as that may sound. I agree with you. Taking the Enlightenment for granted in the context of a simulation of a medieval world seems a little bit anachronistic, even in worlds with magic and full-plate armor. The vanilla world building of the standard D&D campaign incorporates elements from the Dark Ages to the Renaissance, but the political and philosophical underpinnings, like most high fantasy, are very feudal. From this perspective, other cultures were not only strange and beautiful, but also dangerous and unethical, much like Blackthorn and Japan. The reluctance to acknowledge this kind of pre-Enlightenment worldview in a creation of fantasy is where we're seeing these social conflicts. Most people in the Western tradition like to believe that we enjoy self-evident natural human rights, and even if history did corroborate this, fantasy worlds often exist only in a pastiche of medieval societies, but also with external representations of moral structures that in real life are completely internal and subjective, i.e. heaven, hell, and the deities. I'm sure it's difficult for orcs to be good people. when they have a god who rewards them for raping and pillaging the world, and who know well exactly where orcs go for eternity after living a life refusing to do bad. Of course, this doesn't mean that orc society needs to be senselessly evil. It just precludes somewhat the morally relativistic worldview that might grow out of an orcish age of reason. This leads to the next problematic element in D&D, race. The very word is now enough to cause people pause. Is it right to create a world where people are predisposed physically and mentally to excel or struggle based on an accident of birth? Racism in our world is bad. It's a constructed concept that has changed throughout human history. But in a world which actually has different races, is it avoidable? Instead of dealing with that, the backlash of its potential as real-world allegory seems to mean that all races will be made equal, their differences cosmetic. In other words, all races are human. The human with pointed ears, the short-bearded humans, etc. As an aside, much like calling a woman female, I find the notion of using species instead of race a little inhumane. Any dog, cat, or hippo can be female. Only a person can be a woman. So with species and race. But I guess the more pertinent issue is of using racially charged language in the depiction of fantasy races. I haven't read any of the offending material, but I'll take the same tact I use when people asked about another potentially offensive character, Jar Jar Binks. I was 11 when I saw The Phantom Menace, and while I didn't hate Jar Jar, I found him annoying. But one thing that 11-year-old was incapable of understanding was any kind of racial history that might be evoked by his mannerisms. If you think the pink floppy-eared alien was a covert or unwitting attempt to denigrate a race of people, that's your prerogative. But in my case, wonderful the mind of a child is, for it only sees what is. Sometimes a cigar is just a Tolkien-esque monster birthed by dark magic. Try and have fun with it. But what about when humans are subject of such allegory? Like the Vishanti of the Transylvania-inspired horror campaign Curse of Strahd. It's true the name Gypsy comes from Egyptian. I learned that after looking it up myself after reading Pullman's His Dark Materials, where Lyra's the parallel world, they're called Gyptians. If I remember correctly, they were a fanciful answer to one of the great questions of Egyptology. What became of the Egyptians of pharaonic Egypt? Well, the Dusky and Iterat Romani fit the bill if you didn't look into it all. But suppose I wanted to make a fantasy race of people that actually did descend from those Kemetic folk. Would that be inappropriate? Would that be perpetuating an ignorant belief about a real people? Or is it the synthesis of real and unreal for the purpose of storytelling? More complex than that. Other than their computer game incarnations, I've never played D&D. I've never really sought to play the tabletop games, but similar to your Star Trek RPG experience, I took joy in playing with the manual that came with Dungeons & Dragons, doing something I think all imagination connoisseurs relish: world building. The reams and reams of work people put into building worlds, and more importantly, the rules by which those worlds work, was extremely intellectually stimulating, like shoveling coals into the furnace of your imagination. Who knew Sagan's ship of imagination ran on coal? Another part of this, I think, is the sci-fi digest nature of many role-playing games, many of them having suggested reading lists included. D&D, the progenitor of all of them, the progenitor of them, all borrowed heavily from Tolkien, even having hobbits in the first edition, and the system they use for magic is called Vancian after Jack Vance. It's been a long time since I've ever dipped back into the D&D world, anything like as much as I could as a teenager, but I have noticed a growing cottage industry of online D&D campaigns. One called Critical Role has millions of followers and is peopled by professional voice actors, no doubt adding to the enjoyment of watching them. But it also seems to have done what one online D&D pundit humorously called, let the Dharma kids into the campaign group, creating something of a schism in the tabletop sphere that was already growing from the influence of MMO-style game simplification on the rules. D&D is more popular than ever, and with that, the rules are more streamlined and the characters more powerful, the world's less dangerous. That said, everything in a D&D campaign is subject to change unilaterally, making this all somewhat moot. But given what we've been going through recently, I can't help but see more self-censorship by a creative industry. I talk a big game with the Enlightenment on this small topic, but I would like nothing more than to be enlightened about these things. So, pile on. Christopher, actually cursed by an old gypsy woman once. No joke. I do try and keep them shorter. Well, Christopher, first of all, regards to Shogun, yes, there is a similar scene as in the book. It's a little streamlined. Blackthorn arrives, and he immediately sees they're going to do something to him, and he sees a man beheaded. And it was shocking. And when I first watched the miniseries, I was like, no way! It was pretty amazing. But yeah, the thing about Shogun that makes it so great, even as a miniseries, is at first, exactly like you said, they established this society as being brutal and alien and dangerous, but then Blackthorn, he's drawn in and comes to respect the Japanese and understands their culture of honor. And they don't subtitle everything. So you're struggling, you're learning Japanese words along with Blackthorn. And it's man, I loved it. I rewatched it, I don't know, about 5 years ago, and when I first got the Blu-ray, and I loved it just as much as I did when I first saw it. I was a little worried. I thought the beginning, which is in a storm, was a little kind of cheesy, but once they came ashore in Japan, it was not. But look, I agree with you. I mean, I think that the idea of applying, when you're talking about fantasy worlds and all that, I think people are going a little too far. The desire to be inclusive and all that is correct, but like you said, the Romani people, while gypsy can be considered derogatory, like you said, there's an actual reason, and the ancestry of those people could be, and I think it'd be more creative if they went the His Dark Materials route. I think, great letter, by the way. I love your letters. But yeah, it's, eventually we are going, I just think we are in appeasing everyone. We're going to end up we'll be appealing to no one. The fact is, people criticize J.R.R. Tolkien because The Lord of the Rings is too white. But, he set the story basically where he lived, and he was it was just reflecting where he was at the time and the makeup of what was going on, the racial or ethnic makeup. See, it's funny when I say racial because we're all the human race. There's one race that have different ethnicities. Would that be the way to say it? But it's such a weird thing when you're going to try and humanize orcs. I mean, people are like, well, because they're dark-skinned. They're monsters. I've never seen orcs as... there were those debates about King Kong, too. When King Kong came out and the idea that the whole thing was an allegory for the black man's struggle in America. I mean, maybe, but it's also just about Beauty and the Beast. There's a giant ape, that was part of the story, and it's very odd. I mean, we have to make these decisions sometimes. A kiss is just a kiss, a cigar is just a cigar, and a story is just a story, and orcs are just orcs. But if it can make the game more interesting and more complex, does it make it better? Hey, maybe it will. And maybe more people will feel inclusive and they'll play more, which can, I guess, only be a good thing. I guess. Let's see. Mark is here. Mark C is here. Mark Chure is here with another letter. Mark says, Dear Rob, I've taken some time to ponder Sean M's response to my letter discussing gun ownership and open carry, as well as his final request of what I can do with my firearms. I wonder if the events of last week might change some minds now that the actual reason for owning a firearm, or few, has now reared its ugly head. By the way, over the weekend, there were a number of shootings in various locales, including one in Minneapolis where 11 people were shot. So, yeah. Sean was right about one thing. This isn't the Wild West. I'm certainly not John Wayne, and I think you will find that law-abiding gun owners don't view their carrying of a sidearm as reliving the glory days of the Old West. Quite the opposite is true. Those that would actively open carry generally do so to dissuade those idiots who would treat guns like the Old West from using them. Recently, as many cities protested, 20 of our major cities broke into rioting and looting. All 20 cities were run by liberal Democrat mayors. All 20, I checked. Most of them have very strict gun laws. Many of the cities are predominantly liberal, and even where carrying a firearm is legal, you would be hard-pressed to find anyone believing in the data. The Constitution gives of the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. While George Floyd's rights were wrongfully ended, the rights of those now threatened by the warlord of Chaz was ended by those sworn to serve Seattle. And there was a shooting in the Seattle zone. Maybe it's wise to have the ability. One person died and another person's critically injured. Maybe it's wise to have the ability to defend your own rights. And on a side note, the Constitution doesn't protect you against being offended or triggered. For that, grow thicker skin. I wonder how many of the people who just happen to live within the 6 to 10 block area the Seattle government abandoned to Chaz wish they'd brought into the idea of the Second Amendment, as both their mayor and police department left them at the mercy of what are basically terrorists who now occupy the area. Chicago has some of the strictest gun laws in the country. Many citizens living on the south side don't own vehicles, as their life is all right there. I wonder if law-abiding citizens who they armed could have kept rioters and looters from laying waste to the area. Where does someone go to get milk when the nearest grocery store is now 10 miles away? And what about David Dorn, Black Lives Matter? The 77-year-old was killed by a 23-year-old in what was black-on-black crime. Personally, I agree with you, Rob. An armed public could have made rioters and looters think twice. Don't think that's the case. As I said, I open carry. Many in my area do as well. Living in Louisiana, if you don't hunt, you know 10 people who do. With that many firearms in the public hands, I haven't seen many uncomfortable people, and before I carried, I paid attention to people when I witnessed someone who was. Nobody batted an eye. Firearms are very much a part of people's lives. It's not a culture, it's just a fact that they exist and nobody seems concerned. What I do find interesting is my city, as well as Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and other neighboring cities and towns, all had protests and all were peaceful. It's amazing how civil people act when the public is armed to the teeth. No, sir, I think I'll keep my firearm on my waist. If knowledge of my having it, make some people feel uncomfortable, it's a small price to pay if it deters something like what's going on in Seattle, Portland, and now, as I understand it, Los Angeles from happening. On a personal note, Rob, hearing about the threatening letters you got greatly upsets me. Might I personally recommend the Sig Sauer P320? It's a modular semi-automatic pistol, which means you can get it to handle 9mm or 357. I'm actually very familiar with this gun. It is quite a firearm. The 9mm holds 17 rounds in the magazine, and after 111 rounds, actually 1,100 rounds, I have yet to have a jam or any other issue. The grip feels great, and the gun is ready to fire right out of the case. You get the pistol and 2 magazines for about $600. Only warning I give is keep your chamber empty, at least until you become comfortable with it, as it doesn't have an external safety. I think it's the best gun for the price. At the end of the day, I know not everyone agrees with me. Again, if you are uncomfortable with or fearful of firearms, then don't own one. You aren't ready for the responsibility. Many never are. All I can do is ask everyone to mind your surroundings and be safe. I love hearing your letters and reading your chats, even if they disparage me. Mark C. Well, Mark, again, a great letter. Thank you for writing in. It's nice to hear your perspective, especially from, we have guns in this country. And it's nice to hear cogent reasoning from somebody who owns a firearm. I think that's important, and it helps people understand where others are coming from. So thank you for writing that kind of a letter that can be shared and people don't get, totally crazy. But yeah, I mean, what's going on? We had a major shooting in New York City. We had a major shooting in Minneapolis. There was a shooting at the Chaz, or what's now called something else now. Apparently people from outside came in and killed one man. A 19-year-old kid died. Now, what's interesting is apparently the people that run Chaz, but the Seattle City Council was having a problem figuring out who ran it. So this is my problem, as Brett Weinstein was saying, for all of these new movements that have arisen, who do you talk to? Who's their voice, their national voice? They're fragmented. And who do you talk to? Where is the policy? All these people that want things, they want to dismantle or defund the police, and they want to take down this, they want to take down that. There's no real central voice that's speaking, so you can't talk to anybody. How is the government supposed to speak with protesters and find out what they want? And if people are getting shot, 2 people got shot in Chaz. So is that the fault that the police were gone? I would say that's the fault of Chaz existing at all. So do the people there feel, I mean, you're going to have a lot of people with a lot of heated opinions, but one person, a 19-year-old, lost their lives, and another person is critically wounded in the hospital because they were in that zone. Now, are there leaders there that feel responsible? Is there anybody that's going to take responsibility for it, or are they going to blame outside influences? I don't think you can. You set that zone up. If you're going to set up a zone, you got to protect that zone. You know, and 2 people, 1 person died on your watch and 1 person's in the hospital critically wounded. I mean, there are a lot of three-dimensional, very difficult issues to discuss, and there's not a lot of, I see, very real, cogent discussion going on about how to deal with these issues. But this is way beyond my pay grade and way beyond the purview of this channel. But I appreciate you writing in. And I liked that you were so, I liked what you had to say and that you were respectful, which I very much appreciate, Mark. Hi, Rob, at the Post-Geek Singularity. Rob, you have said you never made any money on free enterprise. With your other film, The Hills Run Red, now out on Blu-ray, this has got me wondering, how does it work on you making money on a film? Obviously, the studio and the film backers need to make their money back before a film can start making a profit. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have said in the past that a film needs to make triple its budget before it can be considered profitable. That is a studio movie, by the way. As the co-writer of Free Enterprise, you were paid for the script and then hired and paid as the director. That is correct. When you made those deals, do you have a clause in your contract that once the film is considered profitable to you, could you start to receive a percentage of what the film makes from the box office, selling the rights to TV and streaming services for it to be shown there for a limited time, and home media sales? If you were a producer on The Hills Run Red, the same question applies here as well. We all know you have done extra work recently for the Blu-ray release, so I would think it's safe to assume that you have a new deal with Shout Factory who paid you for that work. Now, I'm going to assume that as a producer on The Hills Run Red, you have a deal to see some of the profit from the home media sale, but as Warner Premiere holds the rights to the film, at least I think they do, and realized it under Warner Home Video, that deal is with them. Would you still see some of the profit from the Blu-ray sales under your original producer contract, even though Shout Factory has now realized the Blu-ray? Peace and long life, Dean Mikitich. Woo, Dean. Woo, Dougie. That is a great question, my friend. All right. Let's. I know. We're over 2 hours, but now let's talk movie making. What I always like to say, it ain't, but like Bob Sugar said and Jerry Maguire, it ain't show friends, it's show business. So I'll tell you a little bit about how Hollywood works. So let me start with Free Enterprise. When we were making Free Enterprise, we were also trying to start a company, Mindfire Entertainment. And Mark and I and Dan Bates were so surprised that we found a person that was willing to fund the company, not just for a movie, but an ongoing concern. So for Free Enterprise, there were not long, drawn-out contracts. What was understood that Mark and I got paid for the script, and we didn't, because we were continuing on and building a business. Mark and I did not get paid as a director, and Mark didn't get paid as a producer. We got a weekly salary for this new company. And that means I was going to get paid for, every week for a year. And on a low budget film, there's not, when you're making a movie, let's say your movie costs $1 million, okay? You usually get paid a percentage of that budget for the script. And, it's not a whole lot. Not a whole lot at all. And the money you get for directing, again, is not a whole lot of money, because if you were to get paid an exorbitant sum of money on $1 million budget, that money is being taken out of the production. You want as much to go into the production as possible. You still want to get paid. But let's say you're making $1 million movie, you're not getting paid a lot of money. And if we didn't make it under the WGA, so we weren't paid a WGA minimum. We were paid, to be honest, we were paid 5 figures that we split. And it wasn't a high 5 figures, but it was nice. It was respectable for the script, for Free Enterprise. But there were because somebody was putting up the money, I had no ownership stake in Free Enterprise at all. 0. There's a lot of other things that happened, but we were setting up a company. Now, if I and the way we made Free Enterprise, a guy just rolled in and said, I want to get back into the business. My wife used to be an actress, Ellie Cornell. She was in like Halloween 4 and 5 and things like that. And so we did not sit down and incorporate and do it right. We didn't do it right because we were so happy. We were so shocked to have a producer that just gave us money, and we just went and made the movie. So I have no ownership over Free Enterprise. Unfortunately, I don't. I think, and to be honest, I have not always been treated fairly since then, but that's okay. I mean, again, you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. In the case of Free Enterprise, we didn't negotiate things very well, or at all. And I could get into more about that story, but for the most part, to answer your question, that's why it's very important to have everything laid out on paper beforehand. In the case of Free Enterprise, we're like, well, boys, I'll get you started. Here's a check for $150,000. Go, and I'll send you the rest later. And we were like, what? It was crazy. We didn't sign any contract. He literally gave us a check after an afternoon tea with him. He's like, here's $150 or $150,000. Go get started. It's nuts. In the case of The Hills Run Red, because Warner Premiere was making the movie and Dark Castle Entertainment was making the movie, so it's a Warner Brothers. It was Joel Silver and Warner Brothers. Director Dave Parker and I had no power. Our reward was getting it made at the studio. So what we had with The Hills Run Red was a buyout. So what they do is basically our lawyer, by the way, did get us, both Dave and I, our initial offer. He did get it substantially bumped up. He got us a 50% better offer than what they initially gave us. So in making Hills Run Red, Warner Brothers and Silver Pictures called the shots. Because it's Silver Pictures, they probably took 25% of the budget right off the top, and then we made the movie for what we made it for. But in the case of Hills Run Red, it was what's called a buyout. They pay for our services. We don't own any of the movie. It is a one-time fee. We get paid. Well, they pay you over the course of the production, but you have an agreed-upon salary, and they pay you that salary over the course of that production. And that's it. You have no more rights to the movie at all. Zero. And what was interesting, in the initial home video release of The Hills Run Red, they weren't going to put any special features on it. And as a special features producer who had just worked for them on Superman, I'm like, come on, man. Because I had taken my own camera and shot a bunch of behind-the-scenes footage. So what I did for the initial DVD release, I made a 30-minute featurette, which at the time I would have gotten paid, believe it or not, $45,000 to make. If I was working in the salad days of the early aughts, doing a 30-minute featurette, I would charge people. My rate to make documentary films or any kind of behind-the-scenes special features was $1,500 a minute for material that was created completely from scratch. So if you wanted 1 minute of material, it would cost you $1,500, and I would get paid that, and how that money would be distributed if I hired other people, camera people, editorial people, sound people, would all have to come out of that budget. So a 30-minute featurette was $45,000. That's what I was used to getting paid through my company as a producer. When we did Hills Run Red, having this movie was I produced the film. I'm like, well, if you're going to put it out on DVD, we can't not have anything. So at our own expense, I took my camera and I made a 30-minute featurette that I gave to the studio. I gave it to them. Now it's on this new Blu-ray, and then we also recorded an audio commentary that we gave to the studio. They wanted me. It exists as a file. They wanted me to put it on HDCam SR HDCam SR. So I did that, and it exists on tape. And they paid for that. It was like $3,000, but they didn't give me any money. And if I hadn't done it myself, there would be no special features on The Hills Run Red. So in the case of Scream Factory, they don't have big budgets, certainly not what we were used to in the 15 years ago, but they had a budget. And I had these tapes. I had 30 hours of material that really hadn't seen the light of day. So Dave Parker, we had a budget. Dave and I agreed to split that budget in half. He took half, I took half. He produced new featurettes that are really beautifully shot, and really well done. And then I went back, so he did the new stuff and recorded the new audio commentaries. There's a total of 3 now. He recorded 2 new audio commentaries and did 3 featurettes that are new. I went back into the footage that was originally shot 11 years ago, and I created all the featurettes from that. And I hadn't even looked at that footage in a long time, so I've been carrying it around like, well, I can finally use it. I didn't even know how the tapes would hold up. I hadn't looked at them in 11 years. So I went back in and mined it all, went back and got all those interviews that I had originally conducted on set in Bulgaria. So it was kind of fun. I mean, the weirdest thing is there is a piece with me, so I'm basically editing a piece that I had shot that it was weird, but I put it on anyway because, you know, you have to perpetuate your own myth, right? So I did that. And let's see. This next letter comes from Jordan Thomas. Rob, thanks so much for reading that out. I was filing small plastic parts when you did. Very apt. So you'll get some pictures up on your gallery soon of the British rail system. People know that Jordan told me that in quarantine, he sent in a letter saying he was building model spaceships and a model railroad. And I said, send in those pictures, son, because I want to see them. Now, let's see. I have a letter. It's a long one. It is a long one. And I'm going to read it. Because I can. Let's see. Here it is. This letter comes from Jeffrey Mao. I like this letter, but I warn you, you know what? Before I read this letter, I'll end with that. I'm going to go back into this talk here. Lancelot had said the Patrick Stewart thing. He wasn't playing Picard. I love that. That was funny. Alexander Wilson goes on and says, the ignorant comment was that the USA has never been more disconnected. Did you forget that they bombed black churches in America that killed kids? Oh, no, of course I didn't. I mean, but I do think that in this day and age, with social media the way it is, I think that we should know more about one another, and we should be more respectful of one another, and we should be more aware of one another than ever before. And it seems like we've gone in the exact opposite direction. That's kind of where I was coming from. And I don't understand it. It's like we're more polarized than ever, and yet we have more information at our fingertips about one another than ever before. And I would think that, I think it's amazing. One of the things in quarantine is I've talked to so many different people. I've done so many different shows. I did this podcast in Poland. We have so much opportunity to talk to each other now. And I just don't understand how we're all so disconnected and angry when we should be having town meetings via Zoom all day long. It's just frustrating. Lancelot says, I meant Patrick Stewart isn't exactly playing the character of Picard. Oh, no, I know. Is he? Maybe misjudged. Forgive me. No, you didn't misjudge. I love that comment. I knew exactly what you meant. Alexander goes on to say, I'm done with the political talk. I just rewatched the Matrix series, and there were so many things that didn't make sense, like how Neo could control machines out of the Matrix. I thought it tried to be smarter than what it is, but I do want to see Matrix 4. Alexander, see how I love. We can have political discussion, but then you can delve back into the Matrix. I agree with you. I love the first Matrix, and I think that it plays a little fast and loose with the mythology. Matrix Reloaded, while I like it, and Matrix Revolutions has a lot of fun stuff in it, it doesn't hold together, and it bums me out because I think The Matrix is one of the great science fiction movies of all time. But, hopefully that Lana Wachowski, she's not working with Lily this time. Lana is doing it on her own. I want to see it. I hope it's good. I really hope it's good. I think it'll be good. I think it'd be good. Vegetable Tube is here and sends in a super chat and says, just ordered the Hills Run Red from Shout Factory. Well, Vegetable Tube, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Report back. I hope you like it, and I hope you like the special features. Card Sucks sends in a super chat and says, defunding the police is so ridiculous, it's insane. Yeah, I think that obviously the police can use police reform, but look, the vilification of the entire police, I think is wrong. Again, it's a very nuanced discussion to have. I watched somebody sent me a video the other day of two police officers. It was horrific. They're making a traffic stop. It was from the dash cam, and they're stopping a guy, and they've got him out of his car, and it seemed to be going normal, and then of course he breaks free. They're on the side of the freeway. He runs, grabs a gun out of his car, opens fire. You see one of the cops go down immediately, and the other jumps over a railing, gets over the railing, and they have a gun battle, and the guy in the car takes off. And it's like, look, am I saying that the police we don't need police from? No, I'm not saying that at all. But again, I mean, it's not like it's all. The police have a very, very difficult job, and with the kind of perpetrators they're dealing with, there's an element of fear. There's an element of, and the police do so much more. There's so many other things that the police do, whether it's domestic disturbances. We do need police reform, obviously, but to pillory the entire police force of the United States, it's like telling us that just because of what happened at Abu Ghraib or something that all of our military are bad. That isn't true. There's most of our military, all branches of the service, are very stand-up, patriotic people that bust their asses, and they do all kinds of work. The military does all kinds of work, just like the police do, and a lot of people do these jobs because it was their calling. I mean, that's sometimes, it was their duty or their family or whatever, and we can't. I don't think that we can ever forget that. Claudius is here. Bonjour, Robert. You're doing a good job when both sides aren't totally happy with what you're saying. I think you're doing a great job focusing the conversation on humanist principles and philosophy. Well, thank you, Claudius. I mean, look, it all comes from Gene Roddenberry's original Star Trek. I mean, I think that's the important thing, is that we have to have these conversations. The problem is, everybody, like, if you're from a marginalized group of people that has never had a voice, that is going to be getting that voice and getting that representation. And that's going to be your driving philosophy, because you've been in a situation where you have been marginalized all this time. And so the time for you to think three-dimensionally and to wait while the problem is solved is probably over. So there's a lot of people that are very angry, that have been angry for a long time, and rightfully so. So the problem is, how do you have conversations, and make sure people are heard? Well, that's tough. It's hard, but it's worth doing. And I've always believed that. I've always believed that the one renewable resource that we do not have is each one of us. There is only one of each of us. And when we're gone, I mean, that's what everything is all about. Everything he knew. I go back to the Sarek thing in Star Trek 3. Everything he knew, everything he was, is gone. Or Roy Batty. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I've seen C-beams glittering in the dark near the Tannhauser Gates. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in the rain. That's true of every single human being on this planet. There's only one of each of us. The loss of every human, without giving them a chance to be heard or sharing what they know, is a loss for everyone. We just don't see it that way yet. But I think that's one of the things I love about sci-fi. Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen, talking about the thermodynamic miracle of life. I mean, who else is talking about that? Watchmen, Blade Runner, and Star Trek 3 each directly address the fact that each one of us is unique. And, that alone, you would think that alone would be enough, beyond race, beyond gender, but just that each individual is unique. You think that would be enough? Like, let's keep these unique individuals around as long as we can, and find out what they know, and share what they know, and share their experiences. Because once they're gone, they are gone. I mean, who's going to have all this arcane knowledge stuck in their head when I'm gone? Maybe that's a good thing. Anyway, Anonymous is here. Anonymous says, have you listened to the Big Finish, The Prisoner audio drama? I have not, but people have told me about them. interesting adaptations of episodes and some original ideas. I'm digging it. The BBC website has 4 episodes streaming on their sounds page. I go there for many quality audio dramas. You know what? I love audio dramas. I definitely have to get I have to get into that. So what Anonymous is talking about, one of my favorite TV shows of all time is, of course, The Prisoner. Patrick McGowan's The Prisoner, the 17 episodes of The Prisoner. I'm a huge fan. They've been doing prisoner audio dramas on the BBC, or on the BBC website. And I haven't heard them, but I heard they're quite good. Anonymous also confirms that, and that is very exciting that they are quite good. I love hearing that. So yes, Jeff Yerkley is back with a super chat. He says, "Hey Rob, Mrs. Y told me to tell you that you're doing more than your part to keep me sane." Bless you and the Burnettwork. Well, thank you. But Jeff, I don't think you can say bless me and the Burnettwork without also acknowledging all of you imagination connoisseurs, you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, because it's your thoughtful letters and all the topics we talk about here. It makes this all worth doing. And on that note, I've got work to do in the Robservatory. I've got things I want to accomplish. I've got goals today, people. I've got furniture to move and shelves to build and stuff to like push around. I do feel kind of like working in the Robservatory as being like a little kid with a bunch of peas that you don't want to eat on your dinner plate, and all you kind of do is push the peas around your plate hoping they're going to disappear. I kind of feel that way. What am I going to do? I just got to bite the bullet and make it all happen. I know what I want to do. I see it. I see my future, and I'm going to be the ball, like Chevy Chase said in Caddyshack. But now I'm going to end this show. I'm going to end Robservations episode number 448 on this special Father's Day 2.5-hour episode. I, of course, want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank Haynock. I want to thank Greg Smith. I want to thank the Richard. I don't know if Jordy Lyons is here. I'll thank him, too. And I do want to thank Detective Jim and his wife, Heidi, because I love Detective Jim, and I've never met his wife, Heidi, and I think one day he'll come back. I hope he will, because we're stronger with him than without him. So I want to thank them. I want to thank all you fathers out there for being good fathers and taking care of your kids. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel by writing letters or sending generous donations and supporting this channel, and also supporting Elizaviews. Elizaviews is taken off. People like that show, so it's great to be doing a show with Elizabeth. It's a lot of fun, and thank you for being kind to her as well. Apparently you're all on her side, not my side, which is, I guess, the way it should be, so I can handle it. But the free the toy thing ain't going to happen. You want that? It's like fetch. It ain't going to happen. Freeing the toys is like Quibi. But I do want all the toys out of boxes. I just fear what happens when Elizabeth sees them all on the shelves. I can see she'll take them without my knowledge, and things will happen. There'll be a toy apocalypse. It's all not good. But anyway, remember, as I sign off, and I'm going to sign off now. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I bring an end to Robservations episode number 448, the show about something. I will be back tomorrow. Now, I will not be on the John Campea show for the next 2 weeks because there is going to be no John Campea show. So I will be here, though. I will be here faithfully doing shows. I think I'm going to stick to 1 o'clock if I can, but I might maybe do 12. But I'm not going to snake John's time. I will not do that because the show will come back, and I think it would be inappropriate for me to take over his time slot. So I'm going to stick to my time slot. I like my time slot because sometimes news breaks by noon, and I can talk about it. So anyway, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to wish everybody a happy Father's Day. And remember, visit Richard on the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page and the Whining About Movies Facebook page. And this week, we are watching AI. We're talking about Spielberg's AI tomorrow. We're talking about Alex Garland's Ex Machina on Wednesday. And everyone's favorite for Romantic Friday, Passengers, which I'm sure a lot of people are already gritting their teeth going, wait, what? Anyway, that's what we're doing. It's Sci-Fi Week on Whining About Movies, so join us. Ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings, kind souls from all over the 28 known galaxies, I bid you adieu, and have a better day.